Meeting for Monday, January 6th. Please rise for the Pledge of our Allegiance. Okay, at this time, we'll have Celebrating Success, and we have Winship School here, and Jody.
Members of the board, Mr. Thorvaldson is here. He is the principal at Winship, and I think he has some staff members with him, so, and a short PowerPoint as well, I believe. Mr. Thorvaldson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mr. Thorvaldson, and I get to be the principal of Winship Elementary School. First of all, thank you for inviting us to join you. I do think Celebrating Success is a wonderful and very symbolic way of staying connected to the people and to the schools you serve. We hope our time with you this evening gives you a better understanding of the staff, students, and the families that we serve at Winship School, and we hope it makes you proud. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce you to the Winship team that put this evening's presentation together. To my left is Mrs. Marty Wesley, Instructional Design Coach, and Mrs. Stephanie Kruger, a second grade teacher, and directly behind me, Mrs. Jennifer Modine, our school social worker, also the district homeless liaison. I'm really proud to be their colleague. As you know, our school is home to about 200 students. Those 200 students learn and grow with this incredibly dedicated, committed, intelligent, and connected professional staff. The staff is made up of 12 classroom teachers, 3 English language teachers, 2 reading recovery teachers, 1.5 special education teachers, 1 speech language pathologist, instructional design coach, social worker, a counselor, a nurse, a secretary, 2 cooks, 2 custodians, a librarian, a music teacher, a physical education teacher, a Spanish teacher, and over 10 paraprofessionals that support students in the areas of library or students with special needs or students with English language needs.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of telling you about the most magical part of our school community, the students. Winship is a small neighborhood school in the heart of Grand Forks, yet our students come from all over the city and all over the world. We have 195 students currently, 80 of whom are learning English as a second or perhaps third language. These 80 students represent 24 different countries, including Nepal, Somalia, the Philippines, and Russia. We also have many students who are second and third generation Winship Winship families, as well as many students who open enroll to Winship because of our reputation as a welcoming community committed to excellence in learning. Although Winship is diverse in our student population, we have a belief system that contributes to our success, one that is shared with the district and many of the stakeholders in this room. It is a belief system that includes building on strengths, teaching skills, and celebrating growth. People will often comment on how different Winship feels when you are in the building, and I believe that this is because they see our beliefs in action. You will see adults working alongside each other to identify students' strengths and to target needs. You'll see students modeling perseverance through committed effort, positive feedback, and a clear understanding of what they need to learn. You will see school leaders helping students in crisis. You will see students working harder than they ever thought they could while having fun. And you will see smiles, lots and lots of smiles. At Winship, we never stray too far from our beliefs. We continue to refine what that looks like but it always comes back to student success in academics and in social and emotional learning. We are fortunate to know the stories and backgrounds of our students. We know the importance of being connected to them and knowing them as a whole child. In order to help our students grow, we have committed to our school vision. We commit to using language that students understand, sharing that language with their families, and asking them to model it daily. We ask that families come to events such as grade level lunch and learns, red events, and monthly assemblies which focus on teaching social and emotional skills. Academically, our students are blessed with the best. The staff at Winship continuously seeks ways to engage students, differentiating for a wide variety of needs and proficiencies. On any given day, you might see co-teaching to support the language needs of all students, paraeducators supporting individual students to build understanding, and students sharing their learning with families through mediums such as the Seesaw platform. Winship staff is consistently working on our school-wide goals, which include raising proficiency in math priority standards, ensuring that all students achieve at least a year's growth in reading, and implementing oral language objectives to build speaking proficiency for our English learners. We collaborate during PLCs, peer observations, and weekly grade level meetings to support these goals. Our teachers also strive to be leaders in the district to create high quality instruction, serving as members of the district literacy, math, and report card committees, the Teacher Advisory Council, and MTSS teams. The district implementation of the high reliability schools model has ignited a more focused, driven practice among all staff, and I hope you take pride in the commitment these individuals have made to that process. All of this has led to consistent academic growth for all students, including a jump from 61% of our students making a year's growth in reading in 2018 to 79% of our students last year. In addition, 100% of our first grade EL learners have made growth in reading, and 100% of our fifth grade EL students have made growth in writing, as measured by the Access test last year. We are so thankful for the opportunities and the direction the district is going to create equitable, high-quality instruction for all students of the Grand Forks Public Schools, and we are proud to be part of that vision.
I'm privileged to be working at Winship as my very first teaching job. When I was first hired, many people commented that I'd hit the jackpot, and over the last 3 years, I totally agree. The connections I've witnessed developed between staff, families, community members that are all centered around student growth have really been inspiring as a new educator. Not only do I get to affect students and their families through my daily work, but I'm honored to be influenced and affected by them, both professionally and personally. I have become a more mindful global citizen, a more reflective and thoughtful educator, and a more compassionate human being because of the people I'm surrounded with at Winship. Not only am I proud of the personal connections I've made, but I'm also proud of the connections that have developed, been developed by others. And here's a look at what other people have to say about us.
And I am a fifth grade teacher here at Winship Elementary School. And what I want you to know about our school is about our connections with our kiddos. We give them experiences that they otherwise would not have if they did not come to our school. For example, so many of our students are from different cultures, and we not only want to learn about those cultural backgrounds, but we have them bring in items of their culture, and we have them teach other students. So overall, we can just feel more connected with one another.
The biggest way adults at Winship make connections with students is by really listening to them. We take the time to be present with kids every day by listening to them and really hearing what they have to say.
Every day, my class and I connect by doing morning meeting. We like to take time to greet each other and to play games and just connect and have fun. Another thing that I do is I share my story with the kids. They know probably more than most people know about my life. And I also like to remember about my connections from former years. So I have 5th graders and 4th graders coming into my classroom all of the time, like just big groups of them. And we talk, we laugh, we give hugs, everything like that. I also connect with future students, especially the 2nd graders, because I know they're coming up to my classroom. And I also like to make sure that I'm connecting outside of school with the kids. I like to go to plays or sporting events that they have and make sure that they know that they're still supported outside of school.
Winship School is a really special place to be, and I think the reason behind that is the connections that we make with our students, with each other as a staff, and also with our families. My favorite example of connecting with families is before the school year even starts, a group of Winship teachers will travel to every single home of our Winship students and welcome them to Winship, welcome them back to Winship, just let them know that we're excited to see them, and I think that has just made a world of difference. Winship is truly a magical place, and the best part about that is those connections and relationships last well beyond the 1 year that child is in your classroom. We're a family.
Hello, my name is Masa. I'm one of the parents from Winship Elementary School. Winship is one of the amazing schools in the community. My son Farigu grew up to love this school, and it means a lot to me the way what they do for my son in the school. They always take care of him, and they always put a smile on his face.
We love Winship because it has
amazing people
and dedicated people, dedicated to each other and dedicated to those wonderful kids. You'll never find a place like it.
Winship School, the connection that teachers have with each other is one of a kind. Staff here are more like family. We take care of each other, we trust each other, we work together so well. We are a team and always willing to help each other out, support each other, and laugh together, have fun together each and every day. We have had opportunities to build on our relationships by going to the Character Challenge course in Park Rapids over the summertime. We've also had chances to visit students' houses together over the holidays and before school begins. We plan events to be together both in school and out of school. We celebrate each other's birthdays, special occasions like baby showers and weddings, and it's just staff that takes care of each other every day. We really treat each other just like we would our family. The staff is just the best, and we are so lucky to have each other at Winship School.
Winship, both as a parent and a special ed para. What I love about Winship is the way the staff supports and encourages the students and each other. They look for ways to be helpful and model treating each other well. They are brave, admitting mistakes, and teaching each other how to be better. They show up 100% of the time for the students and for each other.
Hi, I'm Tracy. And I'm Michelle. At Winship, we take risks. We encourage. We celebrate. We care. We have friendships in and out of school. We are not alone. We have each other's backs. We are family. A Winship family.
So hi Danielle, I just want you to share with the group what you think about when you think about Winship School, and if you could tell us who you are and what group you represent, please, and thank you.
So I'm Danielle, and I'm with Wesley Church, and we have a women's group. And we really wanted to partner with someone right here in our community, and the first thing we thought of was Winship. They're very close to where our church is located, but also we just knew there was a need, and we wanted to do what we could to help with that need. When I think of Winship, kindness and compassion for all. I think it's an amazing school. I think you come here to help at the open house like we have a few times, and the kids are excited, the teachers are excited, and it's a common purpose to help students.
Awesome.
And to help them be successful.
Thank you so much.
I think it's important to say that if any of you do want to learn about Snapchat filters, you can ask Mrs. Michelle Unstead or Mrs. Tracy Plant. They are absolute experts. You know, to close, there's a book. If you don't have it, if you haven't read it, I think you should. I'm going to share a little snippet of it with you. It's by the late Richard Dufour. It's called In Praise of American Educators. In Praise of American Educators. And in this text, Dufour asserts that educators in today's schools are probably the greatest generation of educators that our nation has ever seen. And I really could not agree more. These educators have been able to help more students achieve at levels that we've never seen before as a nation. More students are graduating from our schools than ever before. And more students are feeling engaged and connected than ever before. And these educators are able to do this in the midst of rising student social emotional need and rising student mental health needs. These educators have been able to do this in spite of these great challenges they face day in and day out. They truly are the greatest generation of educators, and we're in the midst of it. We believe the work that we're doing is really about more than proficiency. It's more than a test score. You know, our proficiency will continue to go up. Even as we educate some of our community's most at-risk and vulnerable populations, those scores, those test scores, those proficiency scores, they will go up. And yes, our growth scores will continue to be extremely high. But the most important thing is for us to develop and inspire these young minds and these young people to do more, to do better, and to positively influence this world that we live in. We regularly share this quote that's on the screen now around our school. Joy is what happens to us when we allow ourselves to recognize how good things really are. This district is doing very good work. We are doing very good work. And we recognize how good things really are. And we are so happy that we get to do it with all of you and in this district, the Grand Forks Public Schools. To close, thank you very much for having schools celebrate their successes with you. Thanks for having us this evening. And on behalf of all of Winship, we really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Yes. Was there any board questions with the group? None since they walked out. Okay, we'll move on. We're going to step back just a little bit to number 2. I missed approval of the agenda. So move. Second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Same sign. Approval of the minutes for December 9th and December 16th. Motion. Second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Same sign. We'll move on to citizens' comment. This is for items not on the agenda. And I believe we have one with, is it Courtney S. is come forward? Oop. I need to try.
Bonjour, Anin. Nadijnakas, Courtney Subanasak. Hello, my name is Courtney Subanasak, and I am an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. I live and work here in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and my children attend school here in the Grand Forks Public School District. Members of the school board, school administrators, Labanani, we say Happy New Year. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and I promise I'll be quick because I do realize that you have a really important agenda item and many people here that would like to discuss West Elementary. I just wanted to welcome you into the good new year and say that I do, I'm one of the co-organizers of Indigenous Peoples Day and the resolution that was passed here within the Grand Forks the city of Grand Forks, excuse me. And I know on the evening of our celebration, I couldn't be here for the discussions that occurred, so I wanted to come back around and make a respectful request to be added to the Grand Forks Public School District agenda to discuss the addition of the Indigenous Peoples Day to the school calendar. I don't know what that process really entails, so I just wanted to come in here and make a request. I was at the Native American Parent Committee this afternoon when Mr. Thompson had mentioned that there was a Native American programming update, so I thought it might be timely that I get it into your big, beautiful brains and come to discuss. So that's just kind of a brief update from me. Happy to take any questions if it's appropriate during this time. Otherwise, I could reach out individually or to the school district as a whole or school board as a whole.
We would add it to an additional agenda, so we won't ask questions at this point.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to superintendent's recommendation for discussion, review of the school board norms.
Okay, our norms are be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, advocate on behalf of students, and keep the community in mind.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our item B, a North American program update. Jody?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, on page 11 in your electronic packet is a summary of our Native American programming, and we'll actually have several presenters this evening. We're going to start with elementary and just kind of work our way up. So elementary will present. We'll talk about middle and high school. Mr. Chad Ward, who is our Native American liaison, is going to give an update on what he has been up to this past year and beyond, and then I'll give a short explanation of the Native American Parent Committee, some of the bylaws. There's a ton of information in your packet, so we condensed it into a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, and that should be at all of your workspaces. So we'll start with our elementary folks, Travis Neal and Amy Barch.
So hello, good evening. Thank you guys for having us. I'm Travis Neal. I'm the associate principal at Century Elementary, also the elementary social studies chairperson. This is my first year doing both jobs.
And I'm Amy Barch, the Chief Academic Officer for Grand Forks Public Schools. Part of my portfolio is curriculum, instruction, and professional development.
So a little bit of background with the elementary social studies programming. We use TCI, which is the Teachers Curriculum Institute. This is an online program to teach students about the world around them and how cultures were created through interesting and engaging activities and lessons. You can take a look up there. Those are the different units covered at each grade level. Kindergarten is Me and My World. First grade is My School and My Family. Second grade, My Community. Third grade, Our Community and Beyond. Fourth grade, Regions of Our Country. And fifth grade is America's Past. And with that, you can see there are many opportunities to incorporate Native American studies within those units being taught K-5. A couple examples from TCI that I thought were important to show and share. For example, you look up there, number 1, American Indians and their land. An essential question for that might be, how did American Indians adapt to different environments in North America? Example number 2, American Indian culture regions. So how and why did American Indian cultural regions differ? And then there's just different activities that students might do, some further reading. Fourth grade in particular, they spend about 2 weeks on a unit on American Indians of North Dakota. This unit is a fascinating story of the American Indians of North Dakota. And if you take a look up there, the students learn about the American Indians of North Dakota through different games they play, activities, assessments, discussion with each other, maps, charts, and the teachers have a couple resources at their hands, one of them being the textbook up there, American Indians of North Dakota, and they also have a web-based unit on a North Dakota Studies website that they're aware of. That would be an introduction to American Indians of North Dakota, the history and the culture of American Indians of North Dakota.
And then what I provided in your packet, if you, in your digital packet, page 29 are the newly adopted standards for social studies K-12 for North Dakota. Those are brand new, hot off the press. So that is a great reference for you to look through there and see what the state of North Dakota has outlined as learning for our students. Also on page 58, I know that Travis shared the unit topics, but what I did is I gave you a more comprehensive view of what's included in each of the K-5 units. So then you have an understanding of what each essential question would be through each unit at each grade level. Did you have questions for us right now, or would you like to go through the whole presentation and then have us come back up?
We could have questions now. Do you have?
Okay.
A few. So my first question is a little bit general. Or maybe it's not as general as I thought. The first example that you highlighted, that the essential question, so I want to know generally, where did those essential questions come from? I would take issue with that question. For example, it says, how did American Indians adapt to different environments? And I would turn that question to say, how were American Indians forced to adapt to European descendants? If we're really seriously trying to teach the true history of American Indians. So it was confusing to me when I looked through the packet where those essential questions were coming from, whether they were Grand Forks Public School District questions, or they were from the state.
The state of North Dakota. So if you look, the slide that is up there now, there's a website that North Dakota Studies /curriculum 4th grade. All of those essential questions came from that document, which was produced by the state.
And so I looked at this, I've got this site up, and I'm not clear like when American Indians of North Dakota was published.
I know that for the 10 years that I have been here, it has been that document.
So I would argue that this needs to be updated. I mean, we have learned so much, and I am not Native American, but I have had the privilege of knowing some Native Americans, and we have to recognize that these resources need to be current and up to what is accurate and factual.
Part of the adoption process, so when the state issues a new set of standards, then it goes through our adoption process as well. So then we look through those state standards and we align curricular resources. So part as we endeavor into adopting these new standards as a district will be finding resources that align to meet these new standards.
So then why are these the, why are these the ones that are highlighted?
When the state produces a new set of standards documents, it takes us time to adopt them and then financially to invest in the resources. So this year alone, the state adopted 8 new sets of standards in computer science, DAS, media arts, social studies, science, theater, and visual arts. So financially, for us to adopt resources, we have to do that through a curriculum adoption cycle.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I had one other question. The reading further, because that's throughout this document too. It says reading further. What does that mean? That's students reading it on their own, or that's something that's incorporated in the classroom?
Go ahead.
Yep, go ahead.
It's just a further reading within the chapter that they're doing. Gives a little bit more explanation about the chapter. They do it as a class.
Any other questions? Yep, I'm sorry.
I don't know if mine's so much a question as it is maybe a comment, and I maybe not even for you, but just in general, is the fact that I think part of the reason why the curriculum hasn't been updated to reflect things that we know is because our Native American resources and population have not been advised when we're looking at curriculum, which I think is a huge problem. We have sat up here as a board saying how much we appreciate and want to respect the input of the parent committee of Native Americans in our community. When we were talking about Indigenous People Day, that was something that a number of people said. Let's make sure that they can be here when we discuss these things. Let's have some communication with them. And as our speaker earlier, our public comment said, that parent committee found out about this today. And I'm not really sure why they're not being used as an incredible resource, or other people and leaders in our community are not being used as a resource to feed curriculum, because curriculum is not just about checking off boxes and meeting state standards. It's also about what we want as a school district, which is to have a welcoming environment, just like Winship was talking about, where our Native American students feel very comfortable talking about their culture and having the understanding that their teachers and the people providing the curriculum are comfortable with their culture. And so no question in there, but I felt like that needed to be said because I'm not Native American. I often get mistaken that I am. But I guess I technically am because I'm Mayan, Hispanic. It's just a border. But I feel a real kinship and strong connection to people that I work with. I worked with Native American students a lot in my former job, and I just feel it's just such an injustice. If we're gonna say that we really, really care enough to have this on the agenda, enough for us to go through a packet, then we should be talking to that population and saying, are we doing a good job? So for whoever wants to take in that information, if you have a small part to do in that, then that would be great.
Just to respond to that question, we actually shared this information when we were talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. Courtney came and made a presentation to the NAPC board, and we provided all of this information back in the fall. So they've already received this information. Probably not the PowerPoint, but they got a packet of all the information that you received this evening.
I hear that, and I think what I'm saying is there's a difference between being updated and being involved. And so saying this is what we have is much different than saying, will you please teach us? Will you please come to the table and help us go through this? And providing an environment where people feel like they can be honest about that. I think it's difficult to communicate this because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I'm not saying that there's any intentional kind of ignorance or lack of involvement necessarily happening with different people, but what I'm saying is that there maybe is a lack of recognition that there may be some things that you don't know, and so you need to ask the people who do.
Yes. Janet?
So somewhat, I guess it invited the question, for me at least, with your response to Cynthia's question about what's going on with the actual materials that are supporting these standards and the curriculum. And so you had responded that there are 8 new standards areas that have come out. So where does this fit in the prioritization of rolling out new curriculum? Because one would say a decade-old textbook is not sufficient to keep up with the times, especially in this day and age. So how does this rank with those other 8 that you're needing to get through? And I think what I'm hearing from Jackie is, I think there's a little bit of a hope and a desire that the standards are the bare minimum, and we can do better than that. And I think you probably would agree with that as well. So, updating is one thing, and inviting the dialogue and the discussion, and maybe laying out that plan will help engage that community group to become involved.
To answer your question, the first topic that we have coming up for renewal or for adoption is science. We're in the exploration phase of that, and then hopefully next year is the piloting stage of a new science curriculum, which is also 10 plus years old. and then the next will be social studies is up. So that's the cycle.
Any other questions of this group? We have additional speakers too that are coming. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Brian Lowe. I'm the associate principal at South Middle School. Also co-chair of the Social Studies Curriculum Committee for our district with Mr. Terry Bohan. So tonight I'm going to give you I'm going to try to discuss a little bit about where Native American and Indigenous peoples education lies within the social studies curriculum, specifically at the middle school level. So within the middle school social studies curriculum, within 6th grade, we have ancient history, which covers some hunter-gatherers, original indigenous peoples, as well as technological advancements and innovations of indigenous peoples, including religious beliefs and practices of those indigenous peoples. Moving into 7th grade, we have geography, which is a little bit more of a global perspective. And so there again, we have some more discussion on some Native and Indigenous peoples of different areas and different parts of the world, including First Nations peoples in Canada, Aztecs, Incas, Mayans, and then moving into the North Americans and Plains Indians groups. Also discussing the Aborigines in Australia, as well as other different parts of the world, including Africa and Asia. Moving into 8th grade, we have U.S. history, which is where you get a little bit more Native American education there within that curriculum. Within that content, there's instruction based around early Native American peoples, pre-European colonization, the role of Native Americans leading up to and during the Revolutionary War, and then the role of Native American peoples during colonial expansion and continuing into present day. And then we also have a 9-week quarter course in 8th grade for which is North Dakota Studies, and I would say that's where the bulk of our Native American education programming lies within the middle school social studies curriculum. It is a 9-week course, and there's about 2 to 3 weeks on average. I think, Mr. Bohan and I spent some time talking to the middle school North Dakota histories or North Dakota studies teachers, and just really getting a good picture for what they're discussing at that level in those courses across the entire district, and about 2 to 3 weeks of Native American education within that course that every 8th grader is receiving during that time. And within that course, they're talking about Native American tribes prior to Euro-American settlements, European American settlement patterns and growth and loss of population, as well as things like population changes due to oil development, specifically with regards to North Dakota. There's also some discussion and instruction around tribal governments within the state of North Dakota, describing the structure and the role and the formation of tribal governments, both present and past in North Dakota. And also some discussion with regards to economics of North Dakota and the history of North Dakota, with Native American fur trade, bison hunts, corn trade, and the Dakota Trade Empire. So quite a bit more extensive within that North Dakota history course at the 8th grade level. That's all I have for you. If you have any questions for me.
Any questions on middle school? Okay, move on.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Terry Bohan, principal at Community, co-chair of our social studies department, 6 through 12. So a high school student, when they are an 11th grader, they're required to take United States history. There are 2 different versions of U.S. history. The regular version would have a student following up on their 8th grade U.S. history experience, and much of United States westward expansion and the impact on native cultures as the United States expanded west is a good part of the first month of that class. In addition, there is some conversation about the American Indian movement of the 60s and 70s as it relates to the civil rights movement. So that's what a regular U.S. history course would experience. A dual credit U.S. history course for an 11th grade student would actually experience all of what an 8th grade student already had experienced and more along with the 11th grade class, and that's due to the survey nature of the 11th grade dual credit U.S. history course. The economics student will spend a little bit of time learning about collectivism, which of course is rooted with the barter system. And so that's a little bit of a foundation of Native American Indian economic systems. That might only be a day or two in a 11th or in a 12th grade econ class. And last but not least, as far as requirements, United States government class, which is required for seniors, uses as a foundation of that course the Iroquois League as an example of democracy in action. In the elective areas, North Dakota Studies is also offered at both Red River and Central as an elective. It is a semester course. It uses the exact same standards as the 8th grade required course. We are required to offer that class every 2 years. At Red River, this is the first semester, this current semester is the first semester that course has ever been, had enough students to offer it. Red River has, I think it's somewhere between 10 and 15 students enrolled in that course right now. And at Central High School, for several years, they have offered North Dakota Studies as a semester course. Again, 10, 15, maybe 20 students experience that course. So as a high school student, they are digging deeper, so to speak, in the 4 standards of North Dakota Studies. All of this review of social studies, Native American culture, is leaving off an important component that other students get in other classes, and that is in the area of English. There are all kinds of pieces of literature that a student in K through 12 will experience that highlight the stories of Native cultures. And I'm thinking of 3 in particular. One of them, 2 of them by Sherman Alexie, fantastic youth author if you haven't ever read Sherman Alexie. And then also a very popular middle school novel is Touching Spirit Bear. All of those are very frequent in a middle school, high school English level as well. That's what I have for the secondary high school Native American studies. Any questions you may have?
Any questions?
So you said there was a government's course for high school that incorporates at least one example of democracy in action. Is there any discussion of the U.S. government, federalist versus sovereign powers of tribes, and how the U.S. has interacted with those things? Are those issues broached anywhere in relation to civil rights, for example, or
To go into federalism in a government course would be going pretty deep. Perhaps in a dual credit government course that might happen. Are you talking in the context of the federal government's relation with individual Native tribes and each individual treaty? Or?
Well, no. I'm not going that in depth. I mean, treaties are a very complex area, but simply discussing over the course of time the government's handling of tribal sovereign nations in the sense of assimilation versus reservation theories. I mean, that's a very high-level conversation about how the federal government interacts with sovereign tribes and explains a rationale for the interrelationship between 2 governmental bodies.
To answer your question, I would say it is more so in United States history that is discussed, especially through the Dawes Act of 1877 and the creation of the reservation policy of the United States government.
Okay, so that is covered.
And that would be more in United States history, not in 12th grade government.
Okay. Thank you.
My oldest son is going through high school right now. He's a senior, has had a really wonderful history teacher who handles those topics. I mean, I just adore this teacher. Like the way that my son discusses things with me after having a discussion with his classmates who don't always all agree in class about some of these very complex topics is impressive. So we have some really good teachers doing this work. I wanted to say that. But I think we also have some teachers who are very uncomfortable with some of these topics. Just the nature of living in North Dakota, where this topic has some specific special tension, maybe than some other areas of the country, living in a city that's predominantly white. Many of us grew up in this region. And so I'm wondering if there's any sort of conversations or maybe a need for some trainings related to the instructors and how they talk about certain topics related to this population. Because even just a gentle switch in language from expansion, right, of America, and looking at it like frontier folk and how hardy people are, to talking about colonization, right? That's a very gentle little shift that makes all the world a difference to someone who is Native American or has Native American family. So I'm just curious if there's any kind of inner discussions happening about those pieces.
I think it's 3 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago, that the Department of Public Instruction created the Native Americans Essential Understandings document. It is a part of your packet. I do not have the page number. Grand Forks Public Schools sent 3 social studies teachers to be a part of that training. I would say is probably the best expression. Is it something that can continue? I would argue, yeah, it can. It has not since 2 or 3, 4 years ago. But certainly it's something our social studies department can continue to examine and grow in and improve in.
Any other questions? Okay, then we'll move on. I believe Chad is up.
Good evening. Thank you for the invite. My name is Chad Ward, Native American Liaison for Grand Forks Public Schools, a member of the System Wahpeton Sioux Tribe. I've been in this position for 3 years. Each of the 3 years, we've been able to grow each year, adding presentations to all 18 schools, from the elementary to the middle school to the high school. Some of the information that's been discussed tonight and some of the questions that have been asked, like the topics of, how they adapted to living, we look at that as the presentation with the buffalo, for example. We didn't have trees or lumber yards to go to. So for example, with the buffalo presentation, we go into detail of how we started a fire, buffalo chips, how we utilized the buffalo, the significance of the American bison to the American Indian, the Great Plains tribes. It was our Walmart. It was absolutely everything to us. We utilized it for our clothing, to our shelter, things of that nature. So we've been fortunate enough to provide that presentation in all 12 elementary schools. They cover it in the 4th grade history or social studies class, and we're able to reinforce that and give them a visualization with a buffalo box that we purchased from the Intertribal Buffalo Council out of Rapid City, South Dakota. And then on top of that, we've been able to go to the middle schools and high schools and offer some presentations. Lately, the biggest one, the students have wanted to do more. We did cover things of tribal government, Dawes Act, but students weren't really interested in those type of things. They wanted to do more of the dream catching, the origins of the dream catching, the beading, things of that nature. So we've been a little bit more hands-on this year with crafts versus kind of doing some of that history and going towards the later high school classes, hopefully, to do some of those. Some of the discussions I've had with administration, with superintendent, associate superintendent, is hopefully one day to be able to be a pilot into the state of North Dakota and offer some of these curriculums of different languages, whether it's Lakota language, whether it's history or American Indian history, kind of give a little bit more in depth. So those are things that we're looking at and going to. Is there any questions before I go any further, or comments?
Good to continue.
The only thing I'd like to add is, the American Indian population is very complex. There's a lot of members out there. I would say that one of the things that I have talked to administration about doing this year, we have been fortunate enough as a school district to receive a good chunk of donations from a couple different tribes. And one of the things is having a tribal day, having tribal leaders across the Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, coming here to visit, show them what Grand Forks Public School is about. And that is where your opportunity for the resources. One thing I will caution is you might have 10 different American Indians up here and ask them a question. They could have a total different answer on something, whether it's, for example, Indigenous. Some might be familiar with Indigenous. Others prefer American Indian. Others prefer System Wahpeton. So be cautious on how we look at those things, Just because one person feels that way doesn't mean a whole population does. But again, you have your resources with tribal leaders. That is who I would reach out to and would advise, school officials to, if you want, they have the resources, they have the tribal elders. One of the things with our culture that is so difficult is there's no book, there's no Bible per se on our culture. Our culture was oral. There was nothing written down. So it varies from time to time. Even the language, you can have, for a meaning, something as simple as kinship terms, and people have different terms for that. So that is one thing I'll say is you can't group the American Indian culture into one group. It's something that I think we've tried to do a good job of presenting it as a general and giving students, to be able to resources like language apps, history apps that are out there to be more specific. Because this school district, we have 32 different tribes in this district that over 300, 500 students that identify as American Indian. So when I see Winship's presentation at one school having 20 different cultures, that's great to have that under one umbrella. But as a school district, you have 32 different tribes. That's hard to reach all 32 tribes. So if there's any other questions.
Any other question, comment?
I love that idea of having a tribal day. I think you're absolutely right that the tribes are a resource, right? People that are here living in this community or close by are resources. And I think talking about the fact that we have been provided money from certain tribes speaks immensely to kind of our duty to really maybe push and do more. I kind of sound like I complain a lot, I think, sometimes when I talk about these topics, but it's because I always want to just push. Let's push the envelope just a little bit more. We could always say, yeah, we're doing better than we were 5 years ago, we're doing better than we did 10 years ago in our conversations, but darn, why not shoot for being the leader in how this kind of stuff is done? And so I really like that idea, and I think that we can all, I think, do our part in trying to maybe pull in those resources a little bit more and make people feel more involved and more accepted and embraced.
Chad, I just want to thank you for your leadership and advocacy. I know the district was just awarded some grant funds a little bit ago, and I know that you had some hands in trying to get those grant funds awarded to our district, so I wanted to thank you for that. I know that UND specifically, I'm just talking about UND for example, they do a lot with American Indians and have a lot of programs. Has the district, or have you had any conversations with UND about sort of bridging that gap, or are there any connections that have been made, as a result of maybe some of their programs and influencing or mentoring K through 12 students?
So we've been fortunate enough to have a UND student by the name of Ashley Hanna that is doing a volunteer mentorship at the high school level at all three. And she's a student, like I said, at UND, and the topics vary from, the importance of filling out FAFSA to scholarship deadlines to if she doesn't have an answer when it comes to some cultural, sensitive topics, she reaches out to try to find that resource. As far as the rest of reaching out to UND, UND's went through a lot of changes. There's no longer the American Indian Center, which is unfortunate. So I've kind of took it that I want to be better than that and keep building. Lee Janot did a tremendous job of leading that university, and it's not where he left it. So the resources that are left, we do try to, help students with, if there's high school students that need, say they're interested in nursing. Ashley had the RAIN program come and do a presentation at the high school for the nursing, so.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
The last couple of slides are mine. I just wanted to give some background on the Native American Parent Committee. So the purpose of the committee: promote the welfare of Native American children and youth in home, school, community, and tribe, raise the standards of school achievement for Native American students, promote the educational benefits of incorporating cultural relevance, which is part of what Chad does, and does a really good job with that, into the day-to-day educational activities of our eligible American Indian students. This is a really busy slide, but basically what this says is there's an election that's held every few years, and we have a chair, a vice chair, a secretary. We have 2 members at large that are elected representatives for the Native American Parent Committee, and then we also have a student rep yet to be named, and then a teacher that also serves on our Native American Parent Committee. And then my last slide is just a brief part about the powers and duties, and the entire bylaws are actually in your packet. But to summarize, they're responsible for any curriculum that the Native American grant, the American Indian grant, may provide or purchase. They approve the budget preparation, so they set the priorities for the funding for the next school year. They evaluate the program results, and then they approve or disapprove all components of the Native American education program. So they've tried to meet more often. I will tell you that hasn't been as successful, so that was part of our meeting this afternoon, was try to get back on track with having more meetings, some in the afternoon that are more business-like, and then some in the evenings that are maybe more focused on different activities or events to get more parents and families to those events. So I think that is all we had for you this evening.
Okay, any questions? Joe?
My question is, how often do you have like meetings that are maybe open to the public? Because I guess I've never, are those kinds of meetings ever posted? They are posted, okay.
Yep, and there's also we have a Native American site on our website.
Right.
That lists all of the meeting times, the meeting minutes
Sure.
from our past meetings, and then agendas. But just like your meetings, they're posted, so
Sure.
you're welcome to attend any of them.
Okay. Shannon?
Can I make a suggestion? I mean, based upon what we know about different cultures and how they find information about everything from employment opportunities to community meetings, that maybe we try to put something on the radio too. That was brought up at a meeting this last weekend that KNOX has a free community bulletin opportunity, where that might be another resource or way to get out to the public and of no cost to us.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, at this time, we're going to move on to Future of West School. We will at this time have a presentation by the staff. When that is completed, we'll have comments from the citizens who have filled out a blue card. If you haven't filled one out, would like to, please do and get it to us. And then we'll have board discussion. We'll turn it over to Dr. Brenner.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. In your board packet, starting on page 83, is the cover memo of the presentation that Scott Berge, Jody Thompson, and I have for you this evening. And first of all, let me just say thank you to everybody who is here tonight, representing West Elementary, who has an interest in West Elementary. We certainly appreciate your attendance tonight at the last meeting. And just a reminder that tonight's purpose is for discussion. No action will be taken by the board in terms of making a decision. So I want to thank you on behalf of the district, on behalf of the board, for being here this evening. Just about 2 years ago, this coming February, the board selected me as their next superintendent. And one of the questions that was asked of me was, what are we going to do about the budget? How are we going to reconcile the budget? And what are we going to do with all of our facilities when we have this thing called deferred maintenance that does have a cost associated with it? And my comment at the time was, and it still stands today, the public will provide input and give us and provide some direction for us. At the same time, it's important for the public to have data and metrics and factual information in order to make those decisions to move the district forward. And having said that, one of the other things that I said was, if the public, we knew at some point we would need to have a referendum to support our facility expenses. And my comment was, if the public supports a referendum for all of the facilities that we have, problem solved. If the public doesn't support a referendum for all of our facilities, then that's the bridge we need to build between the community, between the school district, and between the wants and needs and the educational experiences of our students. And that's where we're at today. So just about 2 years later, we're crossing that bridge, and we're in what I would consider the muck of the conversation, where everybody has an opinion, everybody has a perspective, and I want to make it very clear, as your superintendent, and I mean that, your superintendent, you selected me through this board, that your opinions do matter, your perspectives do matter, and they are valued. That's why we had 5 public input meetings that were lightly attended, and that's okay. Typically, those meetings are lightly attended until some of the data starts pouring out that suggests, well, here's a school for consideration, or here are some options, and they have names to them. And when you put a name to a situation, you put families and students and staff to those situations. And then that is a cry for, we want to be heard. And you are here, and you're admired that you are here. So I'm thankful that you're here for this conversation tonight. About 2 years ago, when I did start, I had a phone call from a superintendent from Grand Forks who was a superintendent in his early 30s in 1968, 69. And one of the challenges that he had, and by the way, he's still a practicing professor at Virginia Tech out on the East Coast. One of the challenges he had was there were 12,000 students in the school district, 2,500 being at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. The high school of St. James was going to be closing. Central High School was the only high school, which was a call for a second high school in Grand Forks. And that basically was the advent of Red River High School. And he basically said to me, you can well imagine the conversation that the community had about drawing new boundary lines, because there weren't boundary lines before for a high school. Everybody went to Central High School. And so he talked about those challenges, and I certainly appreciated his perspective. Certainly we don't have 12,000 students anymore, we have 7,400. At one time, in my 25 years in the school district, we dipped all the way down to 6,700 students. And we didn't make too many facility changes at the time as a result of the numbers, but the flood had a major influence in 1997. That really forced the district's hands to make some decisions, and the Greenway and FEMA and the levee had a lot to do with whether we could rebuild or we would have to move. So if you've had an opportunity out in our corridor to look at the timeline of our school district, some very interesting things have happened over time, and that's the fluidity and the change process that has happened over time. And what's probably not recognized nearly enough is changes do happen periodically in school districts. They may just not happen for a generation or two. Again, I think we're at that crossroads today. Whether that will happen or whether it won't happen, the public will decide. The community of Grand Forks grew close to the Red River when the community started, and that's basically where our school district started. Central High School is downtown. Wilder is close to downtown. There was a school called Washington Elementary close to downtown. I think it's attached to St. Michael's Church now. Phoenix was Belmont at one time. There was Roosevelt Elementary School on Cottonwood. That's no longer a school. So decisions were made at some point that maybe we had too many schools in a certain area. And that's not saying schools don't belong in a neighborhood, but there must have been a reason at one time that those schools were closed. And we know why Lincoln did close, because there was no option to reopen Lincoln in the site along the Red River. So that's just a little bit of a background that I hope continues to build respectful dialogue. The purpose of the information we're sharing tonight is to provide what we would call factual information that the district has. I know there have been some meetings held, neighborhood meetings. I commend you for that. People have been on talk radio. I commend you for that. Sometimes it's not always the same information that we have, but there might be some information the community has that the district doesn't, where we can do some bridging. And I think that would be a valuable exercise. And the final thing that I'll say is we've enlisted the support of a third-party neutral consultant firm to work with us and to create a community-wide task force. That task force, which will be identified down the road, several weeks down the road, maybe even sooner than that, will involve people like you, people who want to have a voice, people who want to have an opinion, a perspective to help this district move in a direction that provides educational equity and adequacy for all students. And I'm looking forward to that dialogue. That doesn't mean that people are going to be selected because you all have the same opinion. As a matter of fact, there's probably going to be, the board hasn't decided this, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself because maybe I'm just getting excited, that people with diverse perspectives we will want to have at the table to make sure that we're moving in a direction that represents the entire community. not just a segment of the community, but the entire community. So with that, that basically is sort of the historical context of where we've been, where we're at, in a direction that we don't know yet that we'll be going. But we will share some information tonight that hopefully doesn't inflame, but only informs. That's the entire purpose of our conversation this evening. So with that, we know some questions came right away from the board at our last meeting. If West does close, what would the process be? So we're going to talk about that right away, but that doesn't mean West is going to close. We just want to talk about that there is a process in place. And I'll defer to my colleague, Associate Superintendent Jody Thompson, to talk about that. I'm sorry.
So I was listening to what you were describing, and I got a little bit confused as to whether, because up until this point, I have heard that the question being asked of us is not whether West needs to be considered to be closed as a part of the referendum. We're not considering West closure as an option within the referendum or the facilities planning. You are asking for us as a board to consider that on its own, ahead of the referendum option.
As it stands right now, it can stand on its own as a decision, or it can be folded in to the referendum. And I think that will be part of your discussion after our presentation.
That is our choice as a board. But we were asked to give information that if a school does close, how do we do that? That's what was asked at the last meeting.
So I think I was the one who asked the question, and I may have misunderstood. So this is, I think, a different viewpoint on the conversation to point, because for the last two meetings, the conversation hasn't been about West closing or including it in the referendum. It's been about, do we keep West open or do we close West ahead of the referendum conversation? So, I mean, it's just a point of clarification. I want to make sure I'm framed up for what the intent of this information really is.
This board can do either or.
I understand that we can, but this is just a new perspective. Thank you.
All right, we got our technical difficulties, I think, addressed here, so sorry about that. We wanted to make sure the PowerPoint was up so the people in the audience could see. So again, at the board's request, if the board chooses to close West, obviously we want to have a smooth transition for our students, staff, and parents. So we just laid out some transition planning for students and families, and the next slide will be a little more related to staff. So if the board decides to close West or really any elementary school, students could attend tours at their new schools, Winship or Lake Agassiz in this example, before the school year is out. Lake Agassiz and Winship principals and district staff could meet with West parents to answer questions and tour the new schools themselves. If possible, keep the West students together in the same classroom at Lake Agassiz or Winship, at least for the first year. 4, district would communicate with in-district transfer parents and students about their options. Obviously, we have parents that don't live in the community that attend West. We'd want to make sure we work with those families and communicate with them. And then 5, have West students attend either Lake Agassiz or Winship for any summer school classes to acclimate to their new school setting. Do not hold summer school at West, and quite honestly, I don't think we've had numbers the last few summers at West to have summer school anyway, so that's probably not as big an issue. And then host some type of a school closing event, whether that's the last week, the last month, or the last day of school. We've done that when we've closed other buildings in the past, like Corbin Eielson on the Grand Forks Air Force Base. So that's related to students and families.
Jody, I'm going to interrupt you and ask you to talk into the mic, because I think it's, when we're turned this way, looking at that way, I don't think you hear me as well as when I'm talking into the mic.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. So transition planning, can you hear me now? I can't get any more sideways. Transition planning for students and families. Sorry, staff. So allow West staff to indicate what schools and grade levels they'd prefer for next year's assignments. Again, we've done that in the past. We've been very successful. When I visited with the West staff about the transition, this is one of the things they were concerned about, is having some say in where their next assignment would be. We'll try to make that happen. Allow staff paid time to manage the transition of their personal classroom belongings to new school settings. We've allowed up to 8 hours of transition time for that to happen. We pay them for their time. And then obviously buildings and grounds is going to support moving the larger classroom materials, equipment, technology, desk chairs, all of those types of things. If those need to be moved, obviously we're not going to ask our teachers to do that. And then decisions on new assignments would be made before the school year is completed if possible. We think we can make that happen, but there's also some unique positions at West. We want to make sure we get that done if possible, before the school year is done. And then we'd work with the special education staff to transition ECSE programs, the early childhood special education programs, to new locations. I think the preference of the staff and ourselves is that we keep those 3 classrooms together at the same location if we can. If not, try to relocate them where we have current ECSE classrooms across our campuses. And then educational and professional equity. So here are some of the downsides to maybe having a smaller school. Single section classrooms.
Can I ask a question before
Sure.
we move on? Because what I had asked about was what was going to happen to the building. What are the options for the building if it were to close this year?
I'm not in charge of that part.
Okay, so can somebody answer that? Because I had asked for that.
We got some refurb here. What would happen to the building? We would look at all options, but more than likely try to sell the building. It'd be more
Okay, so what would the cost be for maintenance and repair until we get it sold?
really depends on how long it would take to sell. I guess we would just maintain it minimally and temperature-wise keep it low. Likely minimal maintenance. It depends. If it were to close at the end of this school year, what would happen over the summer? It's hard to say.
So do you have numbers on, groundskeeping and those types of activities that'll be required to maintain the property in the interim?
No, I would have to look that up, just normal mowing and minimal things. What else? Oh, we got that one on there. So it'd be whatever we would normally do. I'd have to really dig into the details, but it'd be just normal mowing, and that would be the majority of the work, and to keep it maintained over the summertime.
Security, would we have people there to make sure that nobody's breaking into an empty building?
We would have, just as with all of our buildings, we have folks randomly check facilities, etc. You want to hop in?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a little bit important, at least from my standpoint, as to what we're doing with an asset of the district if we were to close it and shutter it. And so I thought I had asked for that the last go around, what the options were for the building, what plans were for the building if we were planning to utilize the building. I appreciate knowing that it would be selling the building is what we'd be looking to do. But I do think it's important, at least to me, to know the full picture and the plan, not only for the families and staff, which I think we had heard a little bit about at the past meeting, but what's happening to this asset of the district.
So if I can speak to a couple of those items. First, we have in-house groundskeeping, so that would be incorporated in. As far as checking on the building, B&G staff is throughout the area all summer long. We'd stop in daily, make sure the site was secure, and obviously when our guys are mowing the yard. Those costs it's really hard to pull them out of a bigger picture just because it's embedded. Wes doesn't have a huge grain footprint since we're so close to University Park, so really the maintenance there would be minimal. We'd obviously keep the playground up as long as we had the property in our possession, and make sure that it was safe for the kids to play on still. So.
And so if in terms of long range, if we're not able to sell it in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, where do we draw the line at, demoing the building, and what's the cost of that?
There would be more conversation, at the board level, and you would be the seller of the building, so you would decide to set the price with a realtor, decide, if this is a direction that the district goes, you would decide who the buyer would be and what the purpose of that building would be, so it fits within the neighborhood, so it doesn't become something that's blight within the neighborhood. That's not what we would want.
So do we know what the potential value of the buildings or the property itself stands at right now?
Well, with the deferred maintenance piece, you can, when there's 2.4 million that needs to be put into it, it's pretty difficult to put a price on it. We would want to work with a realtor on that.
And so we haven't done any sort of outreach to determine that?
we haven't decided whether we're closing the school or not, so it's premature to go out and try to lay the building out there and say, hey, anybody interested? Can we do this? I
So
think
I guess
that
I
especially
disagree
when
a
the
little bit
maintenance
about
of the
that.
building just sitting there is very minimal, because all we're gonna do is mow it, keep heat at a low cost during the winter, low end, and then we're gonna hopefully keep it up so windows aren't broken and everything is on. We have people a block away that are running Valley Middle School that can check on a building daily if we needed it to. So that cost isn't there. So I think that, to say what it's worth, it's only worth as much as somebody will give to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're being asked to consider a very permanent decision, and I think as anybody would make a decision to sell their home, before they put the for sale sign up, or they decide we don't want to live here any longer, they would test the market, or at least ask informally. It's not putting it up for sale. So I mean, I think it is a consideration, at least from where I'm sitting. You know, we've talked about the financials of the cost savings to the district, but it doesn't sound like we've factored in or netted out some of the cost of carrying and maintenance and selling as a part of that. So I just, you know, it's a factual conversation. I'm just asking for facts, and you know, I guess it's a difference of opinion as to whether those facts matter to one person or the other, but I guess I like to look long range and not just at the immediate decision and then get to that point and go, okay, now let's decide whether this was a good one based upon whether we can sell it or not.
Okay. We'll continue.
And so single-section classrooms do not afford flexibility in scheduling classroom assignments of students. In other words, balancing academic and social emotional needs, you're stuck with one section. Single-section classrooms do not afford grade-level professional development between and among grade-like teachers. I know they do that at West, but it's typically K in 1, 2, and 3, and so they don't have the true PLC model that we have at other buildings with multiple grade-level teachers. Teacher request options are not available for parents because there is only one teacher in that particular grade level. Staffing patterns require more itinerant positions, which creates scheduling challenges in more than one school. In other words, we have lots of traveling teachers that fill some of those needs in our smaller schools. And then West Elementary K-5 enrollment falls below the desirable threshold, your threshold for elementary operational guidelines of 150 to 500 elementary students. I think Mr. Berge probably has some of the other slides coming up.
I have a lot of slides, so I don't think I could keep my head turned that long, and maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get on TV here and my mom and dad can see me. I gotta have a little fun here. So I'm going through a variety of financial slides here, looking at a long-range financial plan, assuming a referendum fails, and we continue to have to repair our facilities out of our general fund. And we'll look at the flip version of that here in a little bit. This Google slide, opening in Google slide is not pulling up all of the information here. Can we perhaps take about a 2-minute break here and we can get the presentation working? The numbers aren't appearing as they should be.
Laptop? Okay.
I haven't heard a lot of opposition to keeping West open. And that's not to say there isn't out there, because I have heard some, but overwhelmingly, a lot of the public comment and outreach that I've received personally and at meetings has been fully vested in keeping West open. As I've digested this the last couple of weeks, I haven't made a decision either way. I've looked at the data, and I'm more of a non-emotional person. My wife is very emotional, so she balances me, and I understand the emotional aspect of a situation like this. So having said that, one of the thoughts that I had was to make West like any other facility we have. And instead of focusing on West because it is maybe our less lean school and would be a target if a referendum failed and we had to do extreme immediate budget cuts, unfortunately West would be at the top of that list. We're not there yet. That's premature. So I would like to treat West like all of our other facilities. And I think that to do that, if we just included West in our UNESCO plan and included West in our facilities plan, included West in our strategic planning plan that we're beginning to wrap up, and then go from there. So in a sense, what I'm doing is I'd like to make a motion to table the discussion on West School and to have West added to the UNESCO study of our referendum, pre-referendum planning, and our facilities plan and our strategic plan. That's not to say that we can't revisit this when that information has come, and I would hope and I know that the district would put that information out there well in advance, just like we have now. We've had many meetings. We haven't rushed this decision, and we in no way means to rush this decision. But my feeling personally right now is that the better avenue of approach is to just add this to our UNESCO pre-referendum planning as well as our facilities planning. So that's my motion. My motion is to table this discussion, include West Elementary School in the UNESCO pre-referendum planning as well as our facilities planning.
I think on that, we would need a second on that motion. Then if we, as a group. Doug?
Is the motion appropriate under items for discussion?
You can table under discussion. And then if we have a second to that motion and a majority vote in favor of the motion, then the item would be referred to the future, and there will be no discussion on a tabled item.
I think we have a room full of people who want to be heard, though, and I would hope that if we're tabling the discussion, that we are allowing citizen comments to still happen.
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think this is, I appreciate the sentiment, and that was kind of my shock of, so this is an opportunity to talk about this as part of the referendum, because I think that, well, I don't think, that was one of the things I was going to ask for tonight. But I think a change of heart like this after inciting a response like we see tonight in the room, I think it has a chilling effect, or at least it promotes, you know, silencing a voice of individuals who spent, I know, time away from their families, much like we do every week, organizing and formulating thoughts on this. So I think if they would want to have a chance at the mic, they deserve that right.
Then what we'll do, if we don't have a second, we need a second. Otherwise, we just move on.
So if the motion is that, can we not table it following comments from the community?
You can do.
We certainly can, and that's not my intent. My intent is not to stop the discussion by any means or to silence anybody. I think your voices have been heard in what I'm suggesting this stops right now. I'm not saying that behind the scenes we're going to keep planning this. What I'm saying is we're going to stop the discussion on it, and we're going to put it into the pre-referendum planning, and then it just goes on like any other school. It's just involved in that, and if down the future, if UNESCO comes back and our facilities committee comes back and says, you know what, West needs to be included in our referendum, then it is. And if they come back and say, you know what, West isn't included in the referendum, then we start this whole process over again. And it's not like it would start from where we started right now. It would just start all over again with public meetings and with open board meetings like this. So, but just to be clear, I'm not making this motion to stop people from talking. I'll stay all night and listen to people talk. I just am assuming that I know what they're going to say, because we've heard it, and they're more than welcome to still come up and say it.
Just a point of order, so Robert's rules, to table a discussion item, it's not debatable, and it doesn't have discussion, and it needs to be brought up at the next official meeting. If we choose to postpone agenda item, that motion is debatable, and we would define at what meeting it would be brought up next. So someone could certainly ask Matt to amend it to a postponement, because if we table it, it needs to be readdressed at our next official meeting, and it's not debatable.
And I don't think it's a postponement either. I think what I heard in the language was tabling, but I think what this is a motion to not close West, to keep West open, and to consider it as a part of the referendum. That's exactly what I was intending to ask for tonight. So I think that's where this is going, is it's not a tabling, it's not a postponement. It is a decision to keep West open, to consider it as part of the referendum, just like all of the other facilities. Treat all facilities equitably, as we've talked about, and go to the community, as we have planned, for the referendum. And I'll make that motion.
So we already have a motion on the table,
Wait,
but we haven't gone through that process yet. Yeah.
the motion did. Is there a second to Matt's motion? If there isn't, the motion dies lack a second.
So I think I go back to Jackie's comment and share the sentiment of we have a lot of people who may want to still make comments. And so, full disclosure, I intend to move after a request for comments that we keep West open, make it a part of the referendum discussion, and proceed with our referendum development as we've planned to and as we've communicated that we will do going forward.
I would be willing to second that. I guess, would it be a motion to then cancel
We're not in a
vote?
motion during discussion. You can
Okay.
only postpone if you would like.
Till the end,
Pardon?
to the end of the meeting?
Well, I think what we're going to do is continue with the presentation,
Okay,
and then we will have citizens comment, and then if somebody wants to postpone the item, they can do it at that time. Or, okay, tabling it. Well, it's nothing. Right now, it's nothing. So you can't even make
I understand you're saying it's nothing now, but I just want to be
But
clear.
it's under discussion. So
And that's
you
fine.
cannot make a motion and a second to to move it to another item. You have to wait till the next meeting to do that.
I'm not asking to move it to another
Well, you
item.
just said you were gonna have, you just said you were gonna make that promotion to add it, the motion to add it.
I think that you
To
can
agenda.
request further board action at the end of the board meeting.
I
though,
think
can you
this is
not?
becoming
No.
pedantic. Let's just move on with the
Yeah,
presentation.
with presentation will go up. You? Yeah, we did that. Yeah, I already buried yours, yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'm back after the technical difficulties. So again, going through a couple of different long-range financial plan scenarios, scenario without a successful referendum. So I'm going to go through some high-level revenue and expense items. You can see on the screen here the darker columns on the left hand, that's our historical numbers. In the middle is our budget, and on the right-hand side is our projected numbers. And so you can see over the last several years, we had well over 4% revenue growth on an annual basis, dropped to about 2%, and then the year that we're in down to about 0.7%. Part of that was about 2/3 of our revenue comes from the state of North Dakota, and North Dakota had a freeze on the per pupil payment for 2 years. And so that's where you see the drop from the 4s down to the 2s. Now the year that we're in, only about 0.7% growth. A big part of that is the way the state makes their payments to us is based on the prior year enrollment numbers, and that's changing going forward, but for now it's based on prior year enrollment numbers. So we actually increased about 130 students this year, but we're not going to receive a dime of that roughly $10,000 per student until next year. And so that's where you see the big dip in the revenue in our current budget, and then a pretty good increase in the year following. Going out from there, again, a lot of it depends on what the state of North Dakota is going to do in the next legislative session here. At this point, basing it on, we've had 2% growth from the state. There's an increase to about 2.5% there. Also in previous years, local property tax values had been going up at 7 to 8% per year. The year that we're in now is only about a little less than 1.5%. So that's another item that's driving down our revenue. So, projecting out, we're looking at probably less than 3% revenue growth on an annual basis. Construction expenditures out of our general fund, again, you can see that trend, minimal up until 2016-17, then a little over $1 million each of those years. Last fiscal year up to $2.5 million with boiler failures at Schrader and Central. It's a variety of unexpected items that really relates to deferred maintenance, et cetera. Our 2019-2020 budget's for $3 million. We're well on our way to exceeding that this year with elevator shaft issues at Red River, skylights, all kinds of different things. Mr. Arnold from Building and Grounds has identified over the next year about $4.3 million in construction needs that are really on the have to do kind of a thing. And over the course of this winter, we'll see what happens. Obviously, with all the snowfall, there could be a variety of things that could pop up on us. So, projecting out without a referendum, general fund expenditures of over $5 million per year ongoing as part of our $77 million of deferred maintenance. Salary expense growth, you can see where we've been a little bit all over the board. In the current year, 2.5% roughly overall. Next year, about the same. In order to keep our general fund balance positive, we would have to have 0% growth in salaries over the course of 2 years and only 1% in the final year. That's the trade-off with no building fund availability through our tax dollars. And also our salaries and benefits are 85% of our total expenses. So you take that, add $5 million a year for construction, and that's unfortunately where we're at. So likely we would not have 0% raises those years. What we would be looking at, frankly, would be larger class sizes, fewer staff, fewer facilities, fewer class offerings. We've got some curriculum, as was heard earlier, that's on a 10-year cycle. We would probably have to extend things out like that. It's really an all-hands-on-deck situation, as I'll point out here, or be able to show you here in a minute. Total expenses, again, you can see high growth in expenses in the early years. The 2018-2019, that 4% growth, a big chunk of that was the $2.5 million of construction expenses. And you can see that going forward, where in effect we would have to stabilize or basically have flat salaries and benefits for 2 years. Our expenses would grow under 1%. Here's combining revenues and expenses. The revenue is the left-hand column. The expenses are the darker orange shaded column. And it's hard to see from back here, but there are some trend lines, revenues and expenses. We would really have to trend those expenses downward in the future years, as the reason being Here's the history of our general fund balance. At the beginning of 2014, at the end of 2014, 2015, we had a $20 million general fund balance. You can see minimal movement for about those 3 years. Relatively significant drop here in 2018, 2019 with all the construction expenditures. And then the big dip with construction expenditures between $3 and $5 million per year, when in the earliest year it was well under $1 million. So a healthy fund balance is between 15 and 20% of our expenses. Our total expenses exceed $100 million. So a healthy fund balance would be $18 million at the end, and we would be at 1.5 million. In effect, barely over 1% of our expenditures in reserve. If you think on a personal level, whatever your total expenses are for a year, having about 1.5% in the bank at the end of the year, which leaves no room for emergencies. It's really at that point we would have to make some very harsh decisions, unfortunately on a very short time frame, without being able to be thoughtful to our families and teachers and students. Income statement, just kind of the details that went into it for anybody that wants to look at that, where we've been over the years. So now flipping the switch to a financial projection, assuming we have a successful referendum. And what I mean by assuming we have a successful referendum here is that there would be enough dollars available to cover our emergency construction expenditures and deferred maintenance. So I'll show you here in a minute what I mean. Well, actually right now. So you can see on the previous scenario with no referendum, no successful referendum, we would continue to have roughly $5 million in expenses on an annual basis here with our 77 million of deferred maintenance. What this is assuming is that after this next school year with a successful referendum, we would have tax dollars available to cover our building needs, ongoing. So in effect, changing a $5 million expense down to zero out of the general fund. So what would that allow us to do on, again, salaries and benefits being 85% of our total? On the previous scenario, we saw in the last 3 years, 0, 0, and 1% increase in salaries. Here we're at 2.5% the first year, and actually dropping that to 2% the next 2 years, the following 2 years. So actually it would be smaller raises or less staffing, frankly, in those last 2 years. So deferred maintenance costs paid by property tax does not eliminate the pressure on our operating expenses. It's not, we have a successful referendum to cover our facilities needs, and we can just operate without any worries. Larger class sizes, fewer staff, fewer facilities, class offerings, still very difficult but conceivable financial decisions, as we'll show on some other slides here. So total expenses, you can see where it would be a decline in the year 2021 and 2022. That would be due to the year that we would start to see some funding from a referendum to allow us to do some work on our facilities. And so then here's the revenue and expense growth trend, where you can see where we're in those last years, we're really aligning our expenses to our revenue growth at, again, under 3%. So here's the look at the general fund balance from that perspective. Again, a healthy fund balance being about $18 million. We would be down to roughly $6 million at the end of the 2021 fiscal year. And really without increasing class sizes, doing something different with facilities, seeing some operational improvements, stagnant at that, again, relatively small level of general fund, where in the past we had 20 million in reserves. So it would take significant work by the board, the staff, our community to help build back that general fund. So a referendum alone, without any operational improvements, does not solve our financial constraints. Income statement, again, just kind of full disclosure on those two different plans. So that's kind of the high level, what we're looking at, where we've been the last few years, our current year budget, which by the way, is for a deficit of $4.7 million. And we're well on our way to, to hitting that mark, as later on we'll go through the financial statements after we're through with this discussion. So let's look at, change gears here to elementary facilities, enrollment, and capacity. So I've got a few different slides here on enrollment over the years. The enrollment for the school year of 2023-2024, based on our demographers' numbers at the elementary level, is projected to be only 33 students more than we had back in 2014-2015. So that's looking over a 9-year period where the district initially operated without Discovery Elementary, which is projected to be at 575 students at the end of that 9-year window. So 33 less students in 2014, and we did not have Discovery Elementary. We had some pretty full other elementary schools. So at this point, we do have excess capacity throughout many of our facilities, including West, but certainly well beyond West. So in effect, we're, from an occupancy perspective, we're operating too many elementary schools for our current projected enrollment. Enrollment, again, relatively flat over the course of 9 years, only a 33 student gain. Conversation is bigger than West. Along with our deferred maintenance conversations, we have to be able to operate differently in the future. We can't, it can't be just status quo here going forward. Put some numbers to that slide. So in the 2014-2015 enrollment, you can see again there was no Discovery at the beginning of that time period. So Century was at 664 students. You look at that column, totals 3288. Our November 2019 enrollment was 3309 for a gain of 21 students. But only 2 elementary schools had growth in those 4 years. It was Discovery and Wilder. Overall growth less than 1% at 0.6%. Excluding Century, the other schools with declining enrollment declined by 283 students. So again, currently in our schools, we've got a lot fewer students than what we had at that 2014-2015 year. Couple of areas to look at here. We've got the first box with the 3 columns is comparing our last month's enrollment in November 19 to 2023-2024. Per the demographers' estimates, that would be a gain of 12 students in total for a 0.4% increase. Some schools increase a fair amount, some schools decline. Discovery grows by 81, Kelly declines by 65. If you look at Lake Agassiz grows by 35, but in the 5 years leading up to that, it declined by over 80 students. So that's kind of the next 4-year look from the demographer's perspective. The two right-hand columns are the 9-year change, so looking at where we were in 2014 to where the demographer expects enrollment to be at the end of 2023 and 2024. So that 4-year, we've got the 9-year projected growth is 33 students, which I'd mentioned earlier. Again, in 2014, we operated with 33 less students than we have now without Discovery in the picture at all. 9-year projected growth is only at 3 schools, as you can see. A little hard to know with Century with the moves when Discovery opened, but again, where Discovery would be at, Viking would continue to grow, and Wilder would have some growth there. So over the course of 9 years, a 1% change roughly is all in student enrollment. So again, where we were 9 years ago compared to now, a lot less students in nearly all of our schools. Looking at West enrollment on its own, there's the November 2019 numbers. Note the special ed program for emotionally disturbed students was moved out of West at the conclusion of 2018-2019 due to effects on single section classroom school. Next year, or at the end of this year, 18 fifth graders will move to a different school. Currently, 54 of the 89 students live within the West Elementary's boundaries. The enrollment at the end of 2024 would be 84 students, so pretty close to what it is right now, a slight decline. From a perspective, again, of from a financial perspective, our third grade class has 12 students compared to our average class size of 19. So when you equate that out, just teacher salary and benefits on average are about $2,000 more for each student. Yes?
So I found this number a bit interesting because, I was looking at, and I had asked about current enrollment projections at West, and one thing I noticed in what was sent back to me was that grade 4 at West has 23 students. So presumably there was a larger class size the year before at West, and that may have fluctuated somewhat.
I think what I would have sent you, Shannon, was I had December's numbers, so there might have been a change of one student or something like that, yes.
And so, I was curious who came up with this statistic or presenting it in this manner, because we don't necessarily give a bonus to teachers who have, over the average of the school district. So I'm seeing like 24 students in certain class, and we certainly don't decrease salary based on that either. Mm-hmm. So to suggest that a teacher is getting paid $2,000 more per student, I think shines a light on that particular teacher.
That's not what I'm saying at all here, actually. It's if you had two teachers making the exact same salary, one has a class size of 19 and one has a class size of 12, say it's $50,000 in each. If you take the $50,000 divided by 19 students, there's the cost to the district on a per student basis.
Yeah, no, I understand the basic arithmetic to it. It struck me, so I was wondering who decided to put this statistic in there and the way it was presented.
That was me, and I've got other slides that will talk about this in a somewhat similar fashion.
And so, just as a word of caution, I recognize that third grade teacher was the only teacher from West who got up and spoke at this last meeting. And I saw this, and I took it as we were calling attention to that individual. And to me, that can be I perceived it as a very hostile decision to call out that third grade teacher.
That's not, when you look at, it certainly was not intended to be as such. It's not diminishing any value for a teacher, no matter how many students. There's so many cases where, we have special needs, et cetera. This is not what you're, if that's how you perceive it, it's certainly not intended to be perceived.
I did perceive it like that. There's other classes that have low enrollment in this district, and to call attention to this particular individual following on the heels of that person, getting up and addressing the board, I would take pause at that.
Well, I believe I know that individual, and I don't believe she was at that meeting, actually. But I don't believe she got up and spoke as far as that goes. But
point of order, I think we're getting away from our board norms.
Yep.
And And I
And-
just don't
and
think
how
we need to
you
accuse
pres-
anybody of
Yeah, I don't
being
think-
malicious in
Because that's
this.
exactly what you did.
I'm,
is
I'm
you-
entitled to share what my
Yeah,
perception
that's your
was.
perception, but let's
Yeah.
let him give the presentation. Continue, Scott.
No,
You will have your chance.
No, I'm entitled to share
No,
my opinion.
no,
I'm an elected official, just like the rest of
But you will follow the norms and
I
not criticize.
absolutely am. I'm keeping teachers and
No.
students at mind when I'm drawing attention
No,
to
you didn't.
this.
Scott, continue.
Mr. Palmasino, just as a reminder, the last time we met and we were discussing the possibility of lowering class sizes or increasing class sizes, it was requested by the board for us to come up with a metric that indicated what a low class size might look like versus an average class size. And, in Mr. Berge's defense, I don't believe he's of the mindset that he'd ever maliciously or intentionally go after somebody. I think what he grabbed here is the lowest class size example at the school that's being discussed tonight. So I think it's, I hear what you're saying as far as how it could be perceived, but just in his defense, I want to say there was no intention there. He's just doing what the board asked of him.
And we'll have other slides here that talk about that on an overall scale compared to other districts. And again, outside of the enrollment of 89, early childhood special needs students total 37 at West. Estimated savings from an FTE salary perspective if West were to be closed. Variety of positions that we have at West. I believe the total FTE account is in the upper 20s to around 30. Look through various categories. For example, secretarial. There's through attrition or retirement at other schools, we feel like we would be able to place that person at another school. And again, no offense, not trying to call out anybody, just really trying to get at what the dollar amounts are from a detailed perspective. Teachers, again, 57%. That was an estimate. Again, certain classes were assumed were children that had open enrolled and children within the West School District that would go to other schools would be able to be added to other sections at other schools without adding another teacher in another section. And through retirements or teachers leaving the district, we feel that initially a little over half of those salaries could be saved. Upon further review, it's likely all students at West would be able to move to different schools without adding any elementary sections. In that case, 100% rather than 57% of the teacher and higher percentages of potentially pairs and others would be able to be merged into other schools without, again, with additional savings of upwards of $750,000. So if we look at using the $600,000 example with expenses increasing roughly 3% per year, you can see cumulatively what those operational savings would be as we go through the years. So this slide really does, again, refer to class sizes, and this was a question that was asked of me at the previous meeting. And so I took, again, with all of the community forums that we did, the online forum that we did, talked, a fair amount about how Grand Forks class sizes in general are smaller than other large districts in the state, whether it be Bismarck, Fargo, West Fargo, Minot. We tend to have smaller class sizes at each level. So I've calculated our average class size, received data from the other large districts in the state that had ranges. Mandan provided their actual class size. So comparing Mandan's average class size to ours in Grand Forks, we have 31 sections of kindergarten. Using the Mandan average class size would be 23. So you can see off to the right there, cumulatively grades K through 5 would be 22 3/4 less sections in Grand Forks if we had attained the class size levels of Mandan. In the green shaded line on the bottom, so again, this is where salary impact comes in at smaller class sizes. Using an average teacher salary of $55,000 in benefits, those 8+ sections would equate to about $615,000. And so this would be just teacher salaries and benefits. It wouldn't be any ancillary costs, janitorial, paras, potential facilities consolidations, et cetera. If we look at the 3 columns on the right, it's comparing, so you can see on the left, Grand Forks, for example, kindergarten, we're at, last school year, we're at 17.26 students per class. If we increase that to 18.26, it would create roughly 1.7 sections less, so we'd get to 8.68 less sections. Again at I'm sorry, I was quoting the wrong numbers comparing to Mandan. It was 1.6 million at Mandan at 22 sections. If we were to increase, based on last year's enrollment numbers, increase each class by 1 student, and then reducing the number of sections, that we would be able to, roll together, that would, be roughly about $615,000. So, looking back to 2011, we had, 2014, we had 11 sections in our elementary schools of 15 or less students. Last year we had 19, so we almost doubled the number of smaller classes that we've had in the last several years. A lot of that is due to declining enrollment that we've seen in a lot of our schools. In a 1 or 2 section school, if enrollment declines, there's at some point there's no option but to have a small class, such as a 1 section school at West. If there's 14 kids in that grade, there's 14. There's nothing you can do about that. In say a 2 section school, such as Phoenix or other schools, if you have 30 students in a grade, you're going to have 2 classes of 15. You're not going to have 1 class of 30. So it reduces the ability to try and equalize and balance out our class sizes across our all of our neighborhood schools.
Scott, we'll stop here. I think we'll address the busing, which was asked for by a board member. We'll address that at another meeting.
Okay.
I think we got people getting antsy here that would like to speak.
What? They're not excited to
They're not excited
hear about
here.
finances?
Okay, at this time, we'll move our attention to the comments from citizens. I will ask citizens to limit your discussion to the subject, as well as limit it to 3 minutes. And we will, Amber's keeping track of time, so we will give you a notice to kind of wrap it up. As I call you off, please come to the mic. And is it on? Scott, did you leave the mic on? Yeah. Okay, Kathleen Cottle King.
Is it appropriate for me to give the board handouts?
Sure.
I'm a teacher.
Sure. You're a teacher.
As long as it's not homework.
Thorough, I thought. I felt like it told a very interesting story, and you did a wonderful job. I do think that there are some numbers that are missing. So these numbers tell a story, but there are some other numbers, and this is not your area of expertise, I don't believe. So the handout here for the folks behind me, they deal with some other numbers that I think a school board especially should be considering, and perhaps you already have. The first one is the numbers of impact on children in special education. I was told that the number is actually up to 41 now at West. Every month, people can come in, do an intake, and within 3 days, a child who is 3 years or older will be put into the program at West. So those numbers do fluctuate, and right now I'm told they're at 41. And the important factor here in the relevancy is that when children in special ed are moved due to school closure or other disruptions, they lose basically a semester's worth of learning. The reason they're in the special ed program, I heard a caller on KNOX this morning saying we shouldn't be paying for special preschool programs, is because it is a preschool program for special ed children, preparing them to be ready for school. And so that is the reason they are there. It is not a daycare. It is a school preparing them to be ready for kindergarten and first grade. And so when you move them, they backslide about a semester. And in a child's life, a semester is very, very important for their educational preparation. The second set of numbers is anxiety and depression among youth. And it is at an all-time high. And some of the symptoms here, because I know I only have 3 minutes, some of the symptoms I've heard some of the parents talk about already, just considering the closing of school: separation anxiety, fear of attending school, worries about the future. Can you imagine being 7 years old and you're worried about the future? That's what we're seeing, that's what we're hearing. Panic attacks, irritability. Treatment for anxiety and depression. Well, what do you know? Adequate sleep, so that would mean not busing, having a little bit more time in bed, and physical activity, walkable neighborhoods. The third thing, which leads right into that, is childhood obesity. West, like many of the schools in Grand Forks, is a Title I school. Obesity is even higher among low-income children. And the fact that they're walking to school is a wonderful thing. We do know we live in an age of video games. And in my neighborhood, a beautiful neighborhood, a block off of University Park, sadly, I do not see children outside even on the nicest of days. They're inside on their gadgets. And so other than phys ed, when do they walk? They walk to and from school. So neighborhood schools have an impact in many more ways than the fiscal numbers we have seen. These are not being quantified in the charts. I think they should definitely be figured in addition to bullying. Smaller schools have an effect on that as well, lessening bullying. 2 remedies: provide quality education in early life, and create protective community environments, which a small school absolutely positively does. There are many more benefits to small class size. I think you all know about them. And so I'll wrap up, and I'll just invite you to think not just about the bottom line as a fiscal number, but the bottom line for mental and physical well-being of our children in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, I've adjusted my numbers up here. I'm going to take parents with children that are here to speak. And so Emily Mardo, are you still here with your daughter? Okay.
Thank you. I know there's a couple other kids here that probably ready for bed too, huh? I'm Emily Mardo. I'm Elena's mom, and Elena she did speak last time. She really wanted to say something again. Go ahead, honey.
Hi, my name is Elena. Hi, my name is Elena Mardo, and I am a student at West Elementary. I love West because all of the teachers and staff are awesome. West is the best school in the whole entire world. West is definitely not old. West definitely does not look old. We have great air where everybody succeeds together. I love my school.
Okay. Like I said, my name is Emily. Sorry, Spivey, I'm the emotional side here, okay? I have 2 children going to West, Nolan and Elena. I'm one of those parents that petitioned to send my kids to West. I chose West because it's smaller. My son, my oldest, He was my first to send off to school, high anxiety kid. I chose to send him to West, as I thought it would be better to have him at a smaller school to help with his anxiety level. Little did I know it would turn out to be the best decision I had made. As a parent, one of the hardest things I've had to go through is watching him suffer with such severe anxiety. Through the years, the staff at West have been tremendous. They're sitting right over there. From his teacher waiting at the door, just so that he'd walk in without me. His teacher allowing him to hang out with her before school started so I could get to work on time. The multiple calls with the secretary at the time, Hannah, to one-on-one meetings with Angie Jonason, the then principal. His teacher allowing me to call from the class phone if he needed. Calls with the counselor. The paras were wonderful and helpful as well. It was a team effort, to say the least. If it were not for this amazing effort from the team at West, our experience could have been harder than it had to be. I'm thankful to say, though, he is a completely new kid today, and I don't even have to communicate with his teachers on a good note, in a good way. I'm certain that all these other schools in Grand Forks would have the same amazing staff. But sorry, I think in our situation, it was just a huge benefit to be at a smaller school that was able to accommodate his needs. I'm forever grateful for West and the staff. Now, just because my family is emotional about this, I know that that's not a reason to keep West open. There's several people behind me that'll make valid points, and I've heard you guys as well. Thank you. I'm not one to argue. This is hard for me, clearly, to be up here. I have a hard time translating my thoughts. But I do stand up for what I believe in. And one of those things is to keep West open. I don't have time to do the research. That's your job. Thank you. That was wonderful. All that stuff. I trust that you guys are doing what you're supposed to and getting those numbers in. Sorry. It just concerns me a little bit that while we're trying to save money, that we had to hire a consultant to help make some of these decisions. And there's probably much more to that than I can even imagine. Just like I trust that you know all of your statistics, I also trust that you have my children's health and happiness in your best interest. I trust that you care for all students. However, my trust is it's not there as much, as you have publicly admitted that West could potentially cause health issues. Right, Mr. Sorry, Arnold, thank you. Where did he go? It was posted in the Grand Forks Herald that the air quality at West is, of course, not up to par and that there's potential health risks. Dr. Brenner, would you want your kids sitting in that school all day?
May I clarify? The air quality isn't the best that it should be, but it's not a health hazard.
Okay, so then why did it say, I wish I would have written down the quote. Somebody knows what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. We know what you're talking about. Yes.
Thank you. So.
Can you wind up?
Yep. So anyways, I think that's an important thing to bring up, and I felt like last time you guys talked about it and it was just sort of pushed aside, but clearly it is right now again. So as long as I know that my kids can go to school tomorrow and you would send your kid to school there as well.
Okay, Nicole Derene, D-E-R-E-N-N-E, and I think there's two people. Okay.
Hello, my name is Adrian, and my classmates wrote letters to the school board members. Dear school board members, West School is a wonderful school. I have close friends here. There's no bullies and everyone fits in West School. West School has really good teachers and good students. I love West School because everybody is welcome, no matter who it is. I think West School is an excellent, amazing, wonderful, pleasant, marvelous, fantastic, super, outstanding, terrific, and splendid school. Sincerely, Adrian. Dear school board members, if the school closes, where will the teachers go? And will we see our friends if the school closes? And I will be sad if West School closes. West is the best because we learned a lot of stuff. Sincerely, Brayden. Dear school board members, I've been at West for 3 years, and I really want West to stay open because I will miss my friends, and I might take a long time to find new friends. I will miss the teachers, and if the school closes, I will have to go to Thompson, and I just want West School to stay open. I love doing grading, reading, and all the specials. We go to gym, music, and health, library, and I love recess in the winter but I love this school, and I don't want West to close. Sincerely, Gavin. If this school closes, me and my mom don't know what school I am going to. So I want this school to stay up. And if this school closes, I will be sad and I will miss my friends. And West is close to my house. Keep it open because West is a great school. Sincerely, Jackson. Dear school board members, if you close the school, I will feel sad because me and my dad will have to wake up my brothers, and I have to walk to school, and I like it. Sincerely, Chelsea. Dear school board members, West School has been a good school for me. All the teachers are nice. If you close it down, I won't learn that much. I get to be with my classmates. The gym, music, and health and library are very cool. Sincerely, Surya.
I think we need to have this be the last letter.
Okay. Dear school board members, if my school closes, I can't walk to school. My friends will break apart, and I will miss my teachers. Sincerely, Zoyam.
Okay. Can we ask you to lead the letters with us so we can look at them?
Thank you. That was my daughter, Adrian. She's a second grader at West. And my name is Nicole Durain. I am a West parent. I've been a West parent for the past 10 years, and I have 2 kids at West currently. I wanted to make a brief comment about 2 things. One is communication, and the other is collaboration. I just wanted to make note that there's been very little communication from my perspective from the district about this discussion. We received as a parent, I received a text, I believe in late November, early December, indicating that there was an important meeting that parents should attend, and that there would be a follow-up email with details, but there was no follow-up email. So, and there hasn't really been communication to us about the plan, referendum, strategic plan, et cetera, which has led, in my opinion, to anxiety, concern, and confusion. Regarding collaboration, one of the points that was made on one of the slides that was addressed earlier in your presentation was about collaboration between teachers of like grade levels. And I would like to ask, have past and present teachers at West who have been teaching at West during the time of a single classroom per grade level been asked specifically for their thoughts on collaboration? Or are the arguments based on assumptions? In my experience talking with teachers, the collaboration at West is actually quite rich and robust between different grade levels, and also flexibility in regard to allowing teachers to reach out to other teachers throughout the district within the grade levels. So I was curious to know if that discussion has taken place and if there's documentation of that discussion. Thank you.
Nicole, I have a quick follow-up to that. When you say you received a text, was that a district text? Was it from someone at West, or do you know who that came from?
The text you're referring to?
Yes.
I do not know if it came from West School or from the district. So is that what you were asking?
Yes. I was just asking for the originator of the text, but you don't recall.
I should say I'm really hard of hearing, so it's hard for me
You don't
to
recall who the what the origination of the text was from?
It didn't say who the text was from, but it was clearly from a district school.
Okay. Okay. I also just wanted to comment, I think all of us appreciate you teaching your daughter a valuable skill of a filibuster, so thank you for that.
That was all of her. That was all her. She wanted to do that, and she gathered those from her friends. So, so thank you.
Okay, and I'm not sure who's speaking here, but Angela Leterrier, Madeline Leterrier, and Noel, I think. I'm not sure who's driving, so I figured that.
So my name is Angela, and this is my daughter Madeline, who currently attends West. So she just wanted to tell you about herself and why she loves West.
Hi, my name is Madeline, and I am in 4th grade at West Elementary. I love my school, and I love that everybody knows each other's name. For example, Miss Watts, the lunch lady, knows what breakfast I get each day and makes sure I get it. In 2nd grade, I knew and trusted the 3rd grade teacher enough to have her pull my loose tooth. I would be sad and scared to be at a different school. Please don't close West.
So West School, to me, isn't just about the small class sizes or any class sizes. It's about the small neighborhood feel that the whole school has. The importance of these small schools cannot be overlooked. It is an absolutely positive benefit for both the students and the staff to have a smaller school in which everyone knows each other. One of the things that I love most about West is that I know that at the start of each school year, the new teacher already knows who my daughter is and already has an understanding of her personality, her strengths, and her weaknesses. And I know that they've got that from the interactions they've personally had with her, not just from some summary and meeting with the previous teacher and looking at the roster picture. It really does say something when a young child trusts a future teacher enough to let them reach inside their mouth and pull a tooth out. It really does. West has that. I also did a quick search of the benefits of small schools, and I'm not going to repeat them, but just for a few quotes that you can easily find. Reforming public education may be as simple as creating smaller schools. One of the most effective ways to improve student achievement and curb school violence is to reduce the size of the nation's schools. And the benefit of a small school go far beyond academic achievement and test scores. And yet here we are talking about doing that exact opposite thing. We should be fostering and supporting these types of schools. Money speaks, and I understand that, but the money also doesn't add up in this case. West deferred maintenance bill of $2.4 million is 3% of the total deferred maintenance cost, less than 5%. No matter how you look at it, closing West is not going to have a major impact to the deferred maintenance costs or savings to the annual budget. Those staff salaries and benefits will still be included in future budgets. Do what's best for our school and these students and keep West open.
Dr. Brenner, school board members, Chair Paul Messino. I think we're all here for the same reason, is that we love kids. I love kids dearly. I have 7 of my own, 17 grandkids. One of them just spoke. And to me, the neighborhood school is where they belong. They had nothing to do with the deferred maintenance or any of those things, but they always wind up paying the price. Now, I've been teaching kids for many, many years in Sunday school and confirmation, and I love them. I love those kids. And I know you guys gals are serving on the school board because you do too. We have a common goal, but I think we defer when we start looking at closing. One of the best ways to educate kids is the neighborhood school in that environment. And West School is in a perfect environment next to a park. There's homes. It's an area that gets stability from that school, because we're in an area where there are a lot of coming and going with university students, and that's why we bought that house there, because that's where we wanted to be. But that school is the rock of our neighborhood. And those families with kids at West School give the whole neighborhood stability. To rip that out of there is going to really hurt us. It's really going to hurt. And who knows what's going to go in there to take its place? Nobody knows. But I would guess, I got a good thought about what it'll be. Observing what happens in other areas in town, they pop in apartment houses. And so there go the values, even further down. And that's an area I've never seen addressed in all the numbers, was the decrease in values of the homes in the West District. They're going to go down. When you talk to a realtor and you're near a school, the value goes up. You take that away, they're going to go down. In fact, we can all come up with our own figures, but you talk to realtors and find out for yourself. I did some online checking, and it could be 10% on average that your home value will drop. So for me, in my home, that means that a vote to close West School is going to take $20,000 out of my pocket, just like that, with a decrease in the value. And I'm an old man. And I'm only here because when I first started reading about these closing for West, and I thought, man, West is doomed. But then I thought about it some more, and I changed my mind. West is worth fighting for. West is worth fighting for because it's the ideal place to educate kids. The care that these teachers have for their kids, knowing the kids knowing each other, that beautiful park right there, it just makes me really sad. I've varied between just deep sadness and anger over the thought of that school not being there. I've been around there. I graduated from UND back in the 60s. I lived off campus not far from West School. I'm acquainted with that area very well. But to rip that out is not for the best interests of the kids. And I feel strongly about that. Forget about the loss of the money from my home when I try to sell it now. But it's the kids that matter. It's the kids that matter. Thank you for your time. And you know, I go to a lot of meetings, and I appreciate the time that you all give to the kids. It's valuable. Your time is valuable, and I appreciate it very much. I don't take your work lightly. So I thank you. Even Bill,
we need to hurry up now.
I'm thankful for you too, even though you said you'd vote to close West.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, any other parent with kids that I may be missing on the card that wants to talk? with children, okay. And
I've gone here for most of my schooling, and I just want to say, for all of the kids at West, I've grown fond of all the teachers and kids that go here. I love it here. Please don't shut down my school. Me and my friend are gonna sing the West School song. You're a grand old school, you're a high-ranking school, you're the best in the North, you'll say. West School, where the kids are smart and do their part. We're loyal to you every day. Every heart beats true for our own colors too. We're the best school in every way. Should all acquaintance be forgot, and high school is here to say, West School!
hey, can you give us names that, yeah, what was the name? Bryson. Oh, Bryson, okay. Thank you. Sherry Lynn Taylor. Oh, there's another one, okay.
This is Shaylin, she's third grade, West Elementary. She's got a few things she'd like to say.
I moved here last year from a small town, and I was nervous about going to a bigger school at West. You get the small town feel with the benefits of living in the city. I have the best teacher in the world, and I love being a student at West. I love it, and I do not want to go to a different school.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Riley. Finding all these kids.
Hi, I'm Riley Carrier, and I'm an 8th grader at Valley Middle School. I was a student at West from kindergarten to 5th grade. My grandmother is a lunch lady, and my mom is a 3rd grade teacher. This school is my home away from home. At West, all of the teachers, students, office staff, janitors, lunch ladies, they're all a family. These teachers, they care so much for these kids, no one else can replace that. The kids won't feel the same love that they do at West if they go somewhere else. After 5th grade, I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave the people that had been there for me almost my entire life. I still go there after school sometimes to visit my mom or do kickball with the kids. I know a lot of 3rd to 5th graders because they were there when I went to school. I visited my mom's class one day when I had a day off. I helped my grandma decorate the lunchroom for different holidays. When I was in 5th grade, I taught the kindergartners, who are now 3rd graders, how to read and pronounce their letters. When things were happening with my friends or family, I knew I could talk to my teachers about it because I trusted them that much. We may not have a lot of students, but that doesn't mean we are at a good school to keep open. If you move the students and teachers, they're going to schools that are already overcrowded. At another school, all they are kids, same old kids. It's not like that at West. If we close this school, it's like taking away my childhood. I can't go past that school every day and see it closed down and not being used while you're trying to sell it. I can't see it being used as something other than a school. West isn't something you can just throw away when it's old. You can't just replace it. The building and everyone that's there and went there are irreplaceable.
Thank you. Okay. Any other kids? Okay, well, Amanda Walker.
I'm Amanda Walker. I spoke last time. My son Gavin Michael Walker is 4 years old, and he is one of the students that is not accounted for in your numbers. I don't think that is right because my son is included in everything at West. I have the benefit of having an older daughter that went to Head Start, and Head Start is in a Grand Forks public school, but they're separate entities in themselves. Same building, but they're kept separate. This is not what is done with the early childhood program. My son goes to their assemblies. He participates in gym. He participates in everything. He's got a 4th grade reading buddy that comes down to his classroom, and that means everything to him. My son will not do well in a bigger size classroom just because he has sensory issues. So when you add too many students, he's not going to focus. He's going to get left behind. We need to include those students. It's not 89 students. You need to include the pre-K program, regardless, because they are a part of that school. When it came to turkey bingo, they developed a basket just like every other classroom there. They participated. We were there. We won a basket. Wasn't our basket, but you know, there's that. My daughter, oldest, went to Lake Agassiz. My middle goes to Lake Agassiz because West doesn't have that class, whichever. But we all know that it takes one good blizzard, Hannah, for the population to increase. So yes, it's good to have those numbers to project, but that's not going to tell the whole story, because obviously it's still showing growth. It's not showing that it's really stagnant too much, and it's not decreasing. So we need to take that into consideration. And at any point in time, because my son joined West in May of 2019, and they just added a new student to his class. So at any point in time, those numbers fluctuate just like anywhere else, but they can fluctuate because they have screenings. It's not just done in the summer, it's not just done in the fall, it's done on a regular basis. And as soon as those students turn 3 years old, they can get in there. And it's very beneficial. My son is not gonna be able to go by that building and say, Mommy, why is my school not there anymore? That is going to, it's not gonna benefit him. It is very important that these children, especially ones of low income whose parents are having to work twice, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and they have that benefit. You were going to close Winship, and today there's a slideshow on the success of Winship. Give West that chance. Thank you.
And just to state a fact, we were never going to close Winship. I don't know where that came from. Kathy Basler? Kathy?
Sorry, I forgot to wear my hearing aids. Hi, my name's Kathy Bressler. I am a 30-year resident of Grand Forks. I own a home in Grand Forks, which I pay taxes on, and will be voting on the referendum. I'm also a 30-year employee of Grand Forks Public Schools. I teach in the early childhood special education program. And I guess I just want to, I've been in many of our elementary schools, and I don't think there is a bad elementary school in Grand Forks. So, I mean, I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that this is better than that, but I just want to talk a little bit about what I've seen at West, and I've only been at West this year. I think because it is a small school, there's a real sense of community at West. I see things happening that I don't see in other schools. I've seen the school librarian who takes her library funds to buy board books so that the preschoolers have something they can look at when they come to the library. I've seen a music teacher who I believe is probably using part of her prep time so she can provide a little bit of music for students, for the ECSC students at West. Some of the other things about West that I think is really beneficial for our early childhood special education program is it is an older school. That's not a bad thing. I think as we've built newer schools, the rooms, the space for students have gotten smaller. The rooms at West are a nice size room. They're ideal for being able to spread out, being able to have centers, being able to serve a variety of kids and a variety of needs. They also have a lot of storage, which may not seem important, but when you work with a population of kids who may be functioning from 6 months to 5 years of age, there's a lot of materials involved. And any of you who have had young, especially, 12, 18 months old, the smaller the kids, the bigger the toys. So storage is really important. So, I mean, those are just a few of the things that I've seen at West that I think really are good things for our early childhood special education program. And for people who have talked about, yes, our numbers do increase. That is historically, we start at a lower number, we add kids throughout the year. It is a federal requirement, that a federal law that we provide services to these children. So, I mean, I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit. I've heard, the forgotten numbers, those numbers of kids at West, that weren't included. I just wanted to talk a little bit about them and say that just because West is an older school does not mean it's not a good school. So, thank you.
Okay. Christian Halston, there we go.
I spoke last time on a very personal level, and I came tonight because last time I heard what you were saying. I heard that out of the 4 major metro areas that we were underfunding our education, that all of our schools had deferred maintenance, and that we had increased costs due to 1 in 5 students on an IEP. I also heard that Discovery School will be to its capacity in 5 years, and that the existing staff at West would be absorbed by the other school systems, and the school would still need to be maintained. I didn't see the value in closing West, and I continued to read, trying to find information on enrollment and capacity, and I struggled to find that information online. But I did read an article that said the enrollment is projected to be steady, and another article that said that some space at some of the schools is being overutilized, and some of it is being underutilized. And it makes me wonder if the school's resources are being used appropriately to provide the best educational needs for all of our students. In the last meeting, I also heard that it being brought up that it hasn't been looked at whether or not West is optimal learning space. And I think that's valid to look at before we consider closing. When I came here tonight, I had the mindset that this was a community issue. It was not specific to West, and that the idea of closing West was premature, and we should put it to a vote for a referendum to the taxpayers to let them voice their opinion on that. After seeing your presentation, I'm confused on what the long-term goal is. Are we looking at laying off teachers? Are we looking at closing additional schools? As a taxpayer, a homeowner, and a community member, I would really like more information to be put out there and the full picture of what the optimal and long-term goal is. Thank you.
Lee Hensler.
All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I listened to quite a bit of the comments. I spoke last time. I'll speak again. Thank you, Mr. Spivey, for your clear thinking. I agree with that. I want to just say this is a city issue. Obviously, a lot of emotion, a lot of kids being affected, people in neighborhoods, homes, and whatnot. But if you look at the bigger picture at the city, those are all important things, but who doesn't drive around this city and see something where they're like, well, that used to be there, or that used to be there, or why is there plywood on that? Why is that closed up? Okay? And people outside of Grand Forks who we want to move here and live here and contribute to our economy and contribute to our culture, all they're hearing about is how decrepit everything is. All they're hearing about is how the schools are, the air and the pipes and the bricks are falling off. And if I lived outside of Grand Forks, I would not move my kids here. Why would I do that? We can't take care of anything. Everything is falling apart. So what I ask of this board, in my 3 minutes, everyone knows I can go a little more than 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap it up right away. What I ask of this board is that you regain the trust from the people in this community. We all know that there's been some trust issues in previous administrations, previous boards. We can start a clean slate right now. Include West in your planning, as Mr. Spivey said. Include it in the referendum. Let's move forward. We want the referendum to pass. These schools need our support. Let's move on with the business of the day, and let's take care of all of our schools instead of plucking one off over here and then talking about maybe plucking another one off over here. It's creating extreme anxiety in this town, all over town, all parts of town. We don't need to be talking about closing a school. We should be talking about filling the schools and doing what we can to make Grand Forks a better place to live. So I appreciate your time, but remember, this isn't just one school. This affects the entire city and who we are going to be in the future. So thank you.
Justin Berry.
Hi, my name is Justin Berry. I'm not a West parent. I live over in the Riverside neighborhood. 3 kids went to Wilder. I was involved 8 years ago with my neighbors in Riverside in the near north in the fight to keep Wilder Elementary School open when it had 79 students in it. As the presentation showed today, it's up close to 150, and there's 4 modular classrooms there now as well. My main thing is a lot's changed since then, since 8 years ago. One thing too, new changes, new superintendent, Dr. Brenner, I think your openness to public input is very appreciated. With that too, I think making a decision on West before the public forums this spring, before the community task force, and outside of the referendum would be a big mistake. I grew up in Williston, North Dakota. Recently, due to the growth out there, they had 3 failed referendums in 1 year. I don't want that to happen here. If we need to fix up our schools, I want the referendum to pass. I think if making a decision on West, potentially closing West before a referendum, I think that's going to sabotage the referendum. It's going to mobilize part of the community who will vote against whatever you put up, whether it's needed or not. So I thank you, Mr. Spivey, for your motion earlier tonight. I just think it'll be good to get more public input and put it with the referendum and get more public input. I was going to say, besides Wilder, I was involved in my neighborhood too to reopen Riverside Pool many years ago, which has continued to be a great asset for the community. I think it would have been a disaster to not open that pool. The decision to reopen Riverside included a citywide advisory vote. I know that can't be possible with West, but that's, I guess, what a referendum would be. So I think allowing the public to discuss this issue more this spring at the public forums and to get the community task force involved and to placing it within the referendum would be wise. Thank you.
Okay. Whitney Berry.
Hi, my name is Whitney Berry, and I'm a founding member, along with my husband Justin, of the Grand Forks Neighborhood Schools Alliance. This is a community group that formed during the last round of possible closures to elementary schools, and we are united around supporting and advocating for all of our neighborhood schools. We believe as a group that neighborhood schools are the best for students, neighborhoods, and the community. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that you think so too. In all of the public forum reports that are up under on the website, there's a section entitled Organizational Pattern, describes the organizational pattern of schools. And the very first item says that we have small neighborhood elementary schools with small class sizes, especially at the K-3 level. So I encourage you, if you're going to make a decision to change that pattern, that is a fundamental shift and that we actually support the same thing. I'm here tonight to address, of course, the possible closure of West Elementary School. Tonight you've heard already many voices of opposition. I assume you'll hear more. However, I'd like to focus my comments on noting that we actually share common ground on this issue. We all live in this city, and we definitely have a vested interest in what happens here. We care about our students, providing a good education for future members of our community and our society. As taxpayers, we want our elected officials to represent our interests and be good stewards of our resources. On a personal note, I would like to thank Dr. Brenner for being so willing to listen to the community and seeking out opportunities to do so. In the past 2 fights that I've been involved in, public trust was definitely lost. We fought to save Wilder School when it was so certain it was going to close. And now it's one of the only schools, according to that slide, that's showing growth. So I just want to let you know that listening to the community sometimes works out, and you should definitely continue to seek that out. Although we might differ in our views of the particular discussion, I think that we both deeply care about our students and our families, and Dr. Brenner, I just want to thank you for that personally. Putting my community organizer hat back on, I suppose. As a group with the Neighborhood Schools Alliance, we share common ground with the administration and the board on the most important point of this discussion, and other people have alluded to that already. We want to see a successful referendum passed and our schools' needs taken care of. We can go round and round placing blame on how we got here, but the fact remains that the financial need cannot be addressed with cuts alone. Closing West is not a complete solution. The $2.4 million needed for West is a small slice of a very large pie. At most, West would be offered up as a representative sacrifice to send a message to those who want to see belts tightened and tough decisions made. The question is this going to help pass a referendum? We do not believe it will. In fact, we question the logic of creating division ahead of such a critical request. Your own consultant from UNESCO said that you should only move on closing West ahead of the referendum if there was an imminent need to do so. Otherwise, it could be included. We encourage you to do this. United, we're stronger. In a letter to the Grand Forks Herald yesterday, former City Council President Hal Gershman equated the per household cost of the needs at West to 2 cups of coffee a year. Interestingly, Mr. Berge also described the per household cost in a recent meeting as a number of cups of coffee a month. I think it was 4.
Can you wind it up?
Absolutely. Coffee is also something that unites us. Sharing a cup of coffee with someone is an opportunity to connect and unite around common interests. It's also an opportunity to listen to and consider different views. We encourage all school board members to do just that tonight. There's a lot at stake here. Our neighbors in the West neighborhood at Archives Coffee House would like to invite you as school board members to come in and have a cup of coffee on them. I've brought a coupon for that purpose. Perhaps talk to people in the West neighborhood and carefully consider the impact that this decision will have on all stakeholders. I was told by a West parent that at West, the word is used as an acronym where everyone succeeds together. We encourage you to unite our city, invest in our facilities, and include all of our neighborhood schools. Let's succeed together. Thank you.
Sydney Peterson.
Thank you. I spoke last time. I'll do my best to keep it brief. I'll try not to be emotional. I do have a cold, so I've got my little Kleenex. My biggest concern as I look at this process is that it seems that justification has been created so that the school district can sacrifice West in some representation of making the tough choices or fiscal responsibility. Yet I look at the decisions that were made to isolate West. The families west of I-29 being told that they could no longer choose to go to West as they could when my children were there. And right now, 201 of the 388 students at Lake Agassiz are from west of the interstate. So if only half of those families chose to go to West, you'd have another 100 students at West. I'm not sure if it was a policy or a boundary change. I know on North 20th Street, there used to be a little bit more leeway that students east of 20th could choose to go to West, and it was determined that that was no longer possible, that students east of 20th needed to go to Winship. I remember a nurse that I worked with who said, I can see West from my house, but my children have to go to Winship. The decision not to have a kindergarten class at West, and to move those students, it didn't just take those students, it also took their siblings, because you're not going to run, some families will, but I wasn't coordinated enough to run one child to one school and one to another. So that impacted. Denying requests of families to attend West, not counting the early childhood special education students, making the total 128, and skewing the results of that graph in the paper really impacted my trust. I really felt that demonstrated a lack of open information, to make that cost per pupil look bigger. Also, using the inflammatory photos and statements in the newspaper, that was so demoralizing to see our school presented as, this dump that's fallen apart and has poor air quality. That was really, that galvanized me to get involved because I was so upset that that was presented inaccurately. Saying that all the West staff will keep their jobs and then saying that there will be the $600,000 of savings, I don't understand how that works. And I'm sorry, I'm not a numbers person. But in reality, it seems it will be spent at other locations. And then looking at the presentation tonight, it seems that the target has changed. And now we're saying, well, single section classrooms is the reason that we need to close West. And that there's not a lot of collaboration. And I guess my thought is, someone online told me, you need to promote West on its own benefits. There's nothing wrong with West. The justifications for closing West have not been ever that there's anything wrong with West. It's been we don't have enough numbers. So allow parents to choose West, and you may find that you have the numbers there. Sure. Thank you all for your time. It's been very interesting. Matt Spivey and Dr. Lund and I work together at the hospital, and when you do medical decisions, you're looking at risks versus benefits. I haven't seen yet the benefits to justify the risks. I want to thank you all for your time, for your questions. Mr. Manley, I sent an email to everyone on the school board, and you replied. You were the only reply, and I appreciated that. I appreciate feeling that I've been heard. The one thing that I was very upset to hear, and I'm sorry, Mr. Palmasino, but I'm going to call you out. Hearing that you spoke on the radio and said that you would vote to close West before you heard our input was very upsetting to me. It was, you are representing us on this board, and you're stating that you've made a decision without our input, and that really bothered me.
No, I told him at this time, the information I have, I would vote to close West School. And I find it very interesting that that the reason there is a school, Lake Agassiz was enlarged, is the school district visited with Congressional 1 and 2, and they wanted their own school in their own area. At the time, the school board did not decided that 5 schools on the north end of town did not make sense in that area, and they added on to Lake Agassiz. So that way, kids that were being bused from the Congressional 1 and 2 districts did not have to drive by a school to get to a school. And Lake Agassiz was approachable for some of those kids that could ride their bikes to it. So that was a reason why the boundaries were changed. Board members, any other comment?
I'd like to make a comment on the count and the cost per student. That question was brought up, rightfully so, at some of the community forums. And the calculation was based on excluding the salaries of those students that worked with the pre-K. It's, frankly, I'm just disappointed in the fact that you think that we're trying to skew the numbers in effect, and that certainly wasn't the case. The salaries were excluded from that calculation.
Okay, any board members' comments? We'll open it to board members. Go ahead.
I think since thank you everybody again for coming and being invested, and if students are watching, a special thank you to you too. I've had kind of an issue from the very first time this topic got brought up, for a lot of different reasons, and I have been one to sit with the numbers, and I have been one that's been going through the data, and I know that there's some real problems that we're facing, and we can't, have our cake and eat it too. We've got some real hard decisions to make. But I guess my main issue, and I think something maybe sometimes the public doesn't understand, is as a board, we are the boss, right? We're the boss of administration. It's not like city government where like the mayor is in charge of the city council. It's quite different. And sometimes we can't do everything, so we have to very much trust people that are below us on the chart to do work, and we hire people that we trust and that we think are qualified and are amazing people. And I think the fact that we can speak to how great our teachers and paras and everybody is speaks to how good a job we do at doing that. So oftentimes we'll trust them to come up with solutions to problems for us. And this one was one of those cases, I think, where administration came up with a solution to a budgetary problem. And I think that sometimes the public gets confused and thinks that the board just decided to say, hey, maybe we should close West. And that wasn't really the case. And so I've kind of had an issue just because I feel like this is one of those things that should have come from the board, that should have come out of our facilities committee or some other piece. I think if we were going to go to a school closure, then the board should have been the ones that said, hey, we're looking at all this data, and we're thinking this school is the one based on all this other information that we've been gathering over time. And that wasn't really what happened. And I think maybe that's why we're having a harder time with this, right? Because what makes West different than Lewis and Clark, than Wilder, than whoever else? And so I don't know what's gonna happen with motions or whatever, or I don't know all the rules, sorry, I just don't. But I'm perfectly comfortable with voting next week, I think at this point, if that's what ends up having to happen, is that we just have to go to a vote. But yeah, I'm having some issues. And I do think that our strategic plan, and you know, a couple of people have brought up consultants. We have been listening to the fact that people want more communication. That's exactly why we have these consultants. It's not to consult us about our facilities. It's to consult with us about the best way to communicate with the public and with our stakeholders for this referendum. So that's a little bit of an adjustment to maybe what you might have been thinking before. So we are listening. We are saying that we want your input. We want to do this better. And that's why we have those people working with us.
Any other comments? Shannon?
So I'm gonna ask for everybody to just hear me out and not think about your response to what I'm about to say, because I know that oftentimes tends to be what I do, which is I'm getting ready to respond. And you know, having coming off of a new year, and by the way, Happy New Year's to all the board members. I don't think we've said that to each other yet. You know, turning a decade, you tend to look back and think about where were you 10 years ago, and what were you doing, and whether you could have ever imagined being here, or is it the same as it ever was, to quote David Byrne. I looked back at some of the materials when I decided to wisely or foolishly get involved with the last conversation around facilities and ended up getting myself on this board. And I gotta be honest, 2 years has been exhausting. And it's not just the board, it's life in general. But looking back on that, I poured over what I had still in my office from that time. And I happened upon a report, a long-term planning report that Mr. Palmasino and Dr. Lund both were on the board at that time and signed on to. And it was, I don't know if it was a demographic task force, I'm not quite sure what it was titled, but it was a task force of some sort with lots of members on it from the community. And it was asking for input on two separate issues. Number one was the decline in enrollment and the problem that we had in this district with capacity. Too much capacity, in fact, and what we were gonna do about bringing students to Grand Forks. Number two was what we were gonna do about facilities. We had options, our facilities were in good shape, performing arts was on that. The question about a new elementary school was on that, in fact. And if you pull that report, 47% of those that responded said they didn't find that a new elementary school was necessary given what we knew about capacity and enrollment trends, that they were declining. It's really interesting to take that snapshot from exactly 10 years ago and kind of take a look at where we are today. We still have capacity issues. We still have stagnant enrollment. We saw a dip up, and we've seen a decline again. But it's pretty much been on trend with what was being said 10 years ago. And so I struggle very much with this conversation around capacity when I look back and I realize we somewhat disregarded the community input, at least in that one report at that point in time. We ended up building a new school. and we look at some of the information that we've been presented with over the last 9 years, I think it was, and if you add up all the decline in enrollment at certain schools, and then you look at the new school that was built, it's pretty darn close to what's happened across our district. And so I have a hard time, and I'm not necessarily blaming the past, but I'd like to learn from the past. And I'd actually like to stick with what we plan to do and actually follow through on that, which is from the beginning we've said we're going to evoke and try to get involvement of the community, seek that input as we've done in the past. But I think we need to take it one step further and actually not just put that on the shelf and let it languish, but apply it to our decision making. Treat all of our facilities equitably. It's what we've also said from the beginning. When this conversation was brought up, it blindsided me. It was at a work session. It was not on the agenda for that work session to the level of detail that we got into that session. It was a surprise. I don't know who's making the decisions. I don't know who brought this particular decision to the board. But I'm a little bit frustrated that I feel like there is smoke and cloak and dagger on some of this stuff, and I don't think it's malicious intent. I just don't think it's thoughtful, and I don't think we're leaning on the framework that we have promised we would establish and follow through on. And I think we continue to do it. I think this has been 3 meetings of great conversation and great community involvement, but it's exhausting because we are right back where we started. And I understand that's part of the process, but we did this 2 years ago when I got on the board. And we did this back when there was a wilder conversation. And I think if we're serious about earning trust and getting community involvement, then let's just follow through on that mission. Let's stop making it so complicated. Let's follow through on the mission. If we have an issue, which Scott has pointed out tonight, that a referendum on facilities doesn't save the operational costs that we have as a district, we need to start getting creative and figuring out whether we go to the community and ask for more than just facilities investment, that we ask for an investment in our students and we ask for an investment in our teachers. Because just as much as closing a school may or may not impact property value, there is equal information out there and data to say that for every $20 of additional investment in your schools, property values go up. Can't we invest in ourselves? Can't we ask for that from the community and stop creating this image of, divestment in assets? So I really tried to take a look back and stop looking at this as just Wes and start figuring out what it is we can do. And I guess what I would ask as a board member is that going forward, I would like and I would appreciate more options, a solution to the bigger problem. I appreciate it.
Any other comments?
No, I think probably the general consensus is that we should not go forward with this at this point in time. I don't know if tonight's an appropriate time because of the agenda to have a motion, and it probably should happen at the 21st meeting. But if we are serious about small, and I keep small, neighborhood schools, then this isn't just a discussion about keeping West open and raising funds for our deferred maintenance. Because there's clearly at least 2 areas in this community that don't have any neighborhood school. And I would disagree a little bit with people. I think every elementary school we have is a neighborhood school. We're not a super large city, so they are neighborhood schools. But if we're serious about having, and that the best thing is small neighborhood schools, then there's a growing population in the southeast part of Grand Forks that probably needs its own elementary school. There's a congressional subdivisions up there on the west side of Interstate 29 that should have an elementary school. So if we're going to have a conversation, let's have it fully and wholeheartedly about everything, not just West and what is the future of West, but what is the future. And if that comes out, we need to ask for a whole lot of money. We'll have to see what happens. If the community really we know certainly what the feeling of West and some other taxpayers are. We'll have to somehow find out what all the taxpayers feel, because to do what we're talking about, and it has been talked about at these meetings, is going to cost us a substantial amount of money. And is the community willing to support it? We'll have to find out.
I'll be brief. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone's comments. You know, I've heard a lot through this process about communication, and that maybe some people didn't know as much about some of these conversations that are happening. Because you all are here now, I feel like it's a good time to share some of the ways we communicate, but also invite anyone to share with us maybe other additional ways that we could do that. So obviously, one way to communicate is to come to our board meetings. I'm very appreciative of you coming and being a captive audience today. These board meetings are recorded and put on YouTube, so they're recorded live, but you could go back and watch them as well. We are invited on KNOX radio show with JT about once a month. So we do that. Our Facebook way is a great way to keep engaged. We do have a text system that we probably could utilize in different ways. I'm not sure if there's a fee for each time we use it or things like that, but there may be a way we can do that. There's certainly some emails that go out. So there's definitely ways where we've maybe communicated about some of these things. It may not have been clear as to maybe some of the things that we're mentioning. I will try to get better on my own Facebook social media account about posting when our meetings are, what's on the agenda. But I also know that this year is one of the years that we are having a public forum. So every other year, the state legislator mandates, or is it DPI possibly, state mandates that we have a public forum. I believe that date is February 10th, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Brenner, would you mind just providing a few details about that public forum and where and when people could show up to that?
It will be February 10th at South Middle School, starting at 6 p.m. There'll be a board meeting with 2 light agenda items, and then UNESCO, the third-party neutral consultant firm who we're working with, will be setting the stage for conversation between and among community members who want to attend. And we just entered into an agreement with them just prior to the holiday break, so we had a conference call today. We don't have all the details yet, but the details are forthcoming, and everybody would be invited to attend that public forum.
She offered for people to have other ideas about communicating with the public. I do know that the Nextdoor app has been taking off, and you can add events in there to let the community and the neighborhoods know, especially if something like West is on the agenda. You can do the Northern United neighborhood, so that way that community knows. Also, some of the people that maybe want to come and are of an older generation but are not very good with technology, maybe still like just maybe in like Hugo's, like the grocery stores. I'm not saying you got to put them up all over town, but you know, and then again, iHeartRadio does have the community bulletin board, which is free. You walk in, you tell them what you need, or maybe give them a phone call or an email, set something up with them. And just one more thing, Winship was discussed to be closed in 2017 as the 3 Ws, Winship, Wilder, and West.
Not by the Grand Forks School Board. No. Well, whether it's in the Herald or not, whether it's true or not, public is thought. Whether it is, but truth is. There's a difference between what they thought and truth. I would like to just make one comment on this, and I've been on the board for 25 years, and it seems every time we look at helping a school north of Demers Avenue, we look at right away, and many emails I receive change the boundary lines. But we never look at the kids in that change of the boundary lines, whether they really want to go to that school. In 2015, we took kids away from Winship School and we moved them to Wilder to enhance the enrollment at Wilder. Even though Winship those kids were within 5 to 7 blocks of Winship School. we are currently asking kids in the Ben Franklin and the Phoenix area at that same adjustment to go to Valley Middle School. Even though if you're at Ben Franklin, you can live on the north side of 13th and you are going to Valley, you live on the south side of 13th, you go to South. Those kids were asked to go to another school in the best interest of the Grand Forks Public Schools. We have taken kids out of the Ben Franklin area that live within 6 to 8 blocks of Red River High School, and they are now required to go to Central High School. So if we're gonna keep small schools, then small schools need to support themselves. We cannot continue to pull kids south of Demers Avenue and force them to go north just to keep those schools open. Any other comment?
Yeah, then maybe we need to have a conversation with the city about where they're investing in infrastructure and where permits are being pulled.
Yep.
I think it's ridiculous that you're saying that the north side or those communities need to, quote, support their own school.
They do.
The same tuition goes towards each student in
fine.
each area.
And in my feeling is that there are too many elementary schools north of Demers Avenue, period.
Well, that was the building at the time.
Well, at the
That's
time.
what we're with.
And that's why times
And there were
change.
no people on the south side of town when Discovery Elementary
and
was
that's-
built. It was projected to be there.
And has the projection been right?
No,
Yes,
it
has.
really hasn't.
Oh, they have 500 and some kids in the school.
Yeah,
Four-
and it's an 800-plus school capacity. It's barely at 60%.
I think our discussion is done here.
Bill, we can have a conversation off the record if you'd like to.
Anytime we want, but I'm sitting here telling you, what do you tell a kid at Ben Franklin that is 5 blocks from Red River, 5, 6 blocks from Red River, you're going to Central, so we keep our high schools equal?
The same thing that you were planning to tell students who are less than a block from West that now they have to go to Lake Agassiz.
And the kids that are within Lake, or from West School, if you take the West School boundary, divide it in half, the kids that go to east of Winship are within 8 to 10 blocks of that school. Going west to Lake Agassiz are within 8 to 10 blocks of that school. Winship and West, half of West boundary is still the
If
second
you want to have a
smallest
boundary
boundary.
conversation, then we need to have a boundary conversation.
We will have one, but I will be opposed to forcing kids going north, period. Now, we're done with this.
I think this highlights the reason why our consultant is going to be such an important piece, is because we're going to be pulling in people not just from one side of the city, but from all over the city. These are the kinds of perspectives and conversations, I think, that are kind of hidden underneath, that we don't have out in the open, and we need to have some more of those conversations out in the open, that there are some differences and some feelings that affect all different pockets of this community, not just the north end.
I have a real problem with our leader of our board taking a hardline stance like that and speaking on behalf of the board.
I'm not speaking on behalf.
You are the president
am
of the
a
board, and
elected
you were
member of the-
elected as the communicating
No, I'm
person for
not.
this board. Yes, you were,
I'm
Bill.
elected as a board member, and I can speak as a board member.
Then maybe you should not be the president and the person nominated to speak on behalf of this board, which is what we did a number of meetings ago.
Point of order, I think we're getting past our norms, and respectfully, Lee, we're gonna move on with our meeting.
Actually,
so-
respectfully, I'm going to say something. As a resident of this city for 45 years, and I know most of you on this board, I am disappointed that we're breaking down into arguments about things like this. And Bill, I know you very well, and I would like you to answer to me why you feel there's too many schools on the north end of town. You just said that. Why is that exactly?
Because of the numbers. I look at the numbers. You're moving kids up to the north end to try to fill, you're asking kids from Lake Agassiz area to come over and fill west. That's what we keep getting. Change the boundaries. Leave the boundaries where they are. When does a small school become too small? You tell me.
Well, I can tell you, does the school board allow kids west of the interstate to choose to come to West if they so choose? Currently, is that what is the policy here? Can somebody help me out? They don't allow it. They meaning they? Okay, why don't you? Why don't you let parents and children make decisions of where they're going to go to school on the north end if do we not have relocatables at Lake Agassiz? Do we not have, isn't it almost full school? 4 at Wilder? Has anybody even went to the north end and looked at what's going on? If there are families west, there's 200 and some students west of the interstate. If they want to come to West School, and they're driving past Lake 8, if they want to, I'm not saying force them, if they want to, why don't we let them? Huh? They used to. Can somebody answer that, please?
We allow anybody in the district to complete an in-district transfer to any school that has capacity at that school or that grade level. I don't know where this person is hearing that we deny requests to West. That's not the case. We've actually tried to fill West with in-district transfers and open enrollments and the ECSE classroom.
How long ago? Because I got emails and texts today from families who said, from one family who said they were denied access to West.
When?
That was with Allie Parkinson as principal.
That's probably been 5 or 6 years ago then. And it could have been at that grade level, they did have capacity. There wasn't room for additional students. That's what we look at, grade level capacity. Being a one-section school, if there's 22 kids in there, we're not going to take additional students on in-district transfer.
So I know of 2 families in the last 12 months who have been denied access to West.
Again, that could be because of the grade level numbers. I don't know the specifics of those 2 requests.
Well, I can tell you that the perception, Mr. Thompson, is that it is not welcome to transfer from west of the interstate to West. So if the board's official position is that if you live west of the interstate and you want to go to school at West, then are you stating that at this time that is acceptable?
If there is space in that grade level,
Okay,
just
well-
like any of our schools,
Yep.
not specific to West, any elementary school that has capacity will take students from other neighborhoods, yes.
Okay.
At this time, the discussion on this item is over with. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Back into session. Move on to superintendent's recommendation for action. We all here? Okay. Consent agenda? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, carry on. Substitute teachers pay? Dr. Brenner?
Yep, thank you, Mr. President.
Find it here.
Page 122 of your electronic packet. There's a memo in there from me. I understand. Can you hear me now? Somebody came up during the break and said, we can't hear most people up here. Is that better? Okay, all right. There's a memo relative to a substitute teacher pay study that the business office personnel assisted me with. You can see in the opening paragraph comparing our sub rate presently at 130 compared to Bismarck, Fargo, West Fargo, Mandan, Dickinson, East Grand Forks, and Thompson. Clearly, we're ahead of that already, but we are recommending that we increase the substitute teacher pay from 130 to 135. I did have some conversations with some retired substitute teachers who are linked to our school districts. They're retirees from Grand Forks Public Schools, and they wanted some consideration for a differentiated pay scale. That is, if they had 20 years of experience in the district, could they be compensated differently than somebody else who did not have that experience, some kind of a bonus for them. They also wanted me to consider certified teachers who can substitute teach, experienced teachers versus those who simply get their license to be a substitute teachers in the alternative route that perhaps they shouldn't be paid at the same rate. Did some research across the country. You can see down in the third to the last paragraph before you get to the recommendation. There are some school districts, larger school districts, who do differentiate pay that way, compensating and rewarding people who have worked in the district. For me, what it came down to was if we differentiate, and we already have a substitute teacher shortage, I'm afraid we might lose some people who see that we're paying some more than others. Is it a worthy conversation for future consideration or to put to some subcommittee to study? Absolutely. But given the financial constraints that we're in, it's our recommendation that we simply move from 130 to 135, which would be a 3.8% increase for substitute teachers. That would be administrative recommendation.
Have a motion? Jeff, second. Any questions?
I just have a couple points. So one. One point, just as a clarification, I believe East Grand Forks substitute teacher pay in our board packet is wrong. In the August 2018 meeting, and I would have told you this prior, but I just saw this, so I'm just pointing this out right now. The East Grand Forks was labeled at 135 and not 115, just as a comparison. And then I believe it's also important to highlight Minot, because I think they're very similar to us, is at $140 per day. I am definitely in support of us moving the amount to an increase, but I would like to amend the motion if possible and add that we create a subcommittee to study substitute teacher pay, which could include a timeline of when we would review substitute teacher pay, any bonus structures, also look into the what Dr. Brenner just mentioned, the difference between licensed substitute teachers and certified teachers, and then if there's any incentivizing that happens. I just think that there's some conversation that can happen on incentivizing and benefits of our substitute teacher program and recruiting and retaining those. So if possible, I'm in favor of the motion, but I would like to amend it to establish a subcommittee on substitute teacher pay.
Jeff, would you amend your second? Okay, motion was amended to include a subdivision or subcommittee. soon, or just this sometime during the school year to do it for next year?
Yeah, I think to start the, go ahead.
Okay.
To start the conversations to be prepared for the next school year.
Next budget cycle, okay.
I would agree with that, and thank you for that, because I feel like substitute teacher pay is one of those things that keep getting kicked off to the side because they're not like an organized group that comes and meets with us. And so showing some good faith that we're gonna actually look at this, and I think there's a good argument to be made if I'm a teacher and I'm a licensed teacher with experience, that my pay might be able to be different than somebody, you know, who really doesn't have a teaching certificate or hasn't, you know, had the schooling, has just gotten, you know, the minimum, so.
Could I just make one comment about that? Because part of the conversation that I heard during bargaining this past summer with GFEA was when they were bringing up non-licensed teachers and putting them on a different, you know, I heard what the board said then, so I was really keeping that in the back of my mind when I made this recommendation as well.
So the HR study that's going on doesn't have anything to do with substitute teachers?
It does not.
And are there any substitute teachers that wanted to speak to it? Because I got one email which I didn't respond to yet, but he had indicated that there might be substitute teachers available to speak on it. We didn't have anybody that wanted to speak on it, correct?
No blue cards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of said amended motion, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. General fund financial statement. Scott?
Okay, thank you. If you turn to page 123 of your packet, financial statements July 1 through November 30th for the Grand Forks Public School District. First 5 months of the year, revenues of $41.8 million, expenditures of $34.6 million, resulting in an excess of revenues over expenses for that time period of $7.2 million. We'll go through the financials here in detail. If you flip to the next page, 124, you can see the budget of $103 million in revenue. We're at $41.8 million, so we're at 40% of budget on our revenues and about 32% of budget on expenses. And that's typical for this time of the year as to the timing of the state per pupil payment and whatnot. Again, our budget for the full fiscal year is for a deficit of $4.7 million. The next several pages are just comparing the actual to budget, so it shows the remaining budget balance. I think I can turn you to slide 132, which is a look at the 5 months of 2019, 2020, and the 5 months of the previous year. If we look at total revenues on page 132, we have a 1.3% increase in revenues over last year. And on expenses, we're at $34.6 million. Last year was $31.8. So we're $2.8 million higher in expenses year over year. That's an 8.8% increase. Basically, in effect, where we're at with our construction expenditures, it's a $1.3 million increase from last year, and it's through the 5 months we're at 57% of our $3 million budget. Chris Arnold is compiling information that will likely have another facilities committee meeting upcoming with some more detail, but we're looking at he's got well over $4 million of expenditures that we need to do in the short term. And again, as I mentioned earlier, pending some things that pop up like they have here in the last few years. I could walk through anything in detail where other than the construction expenditures, we're relatively close to budget and relatively close on a year over year. I'll certainly entertain any numbers. The one thing I will point out is, again, at this point of the year, we always have revenues exceeding expenses due to the timing of the revenue. But if you do look at page 132, our net so far this year is 7.2 million. Last year was 9.5 million. So we are $2.25 million behind where we were last year at this point in time.
Any questions for Scott? We have a motion, second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. D is joint power agreement with the Grand Forks County for election services. Be on page 137.
Okay, well, we should be able to keep this one pretty brief. Attached is a copy of the joint powers agreement with the Grand Forks County regarding the provision for election services by the county for the school district's board member election to be held on June 9th of 2020. The joint powers agreement is identical to the agreement we had 2 years ago, including the proposed cost of $8,000 for providing election services. So that $8,000 is the same as it was 2 years ago. Administrative recommendation is to approve the joint powers agreement with Grand Forks County for the school district's election to be held on June 9th of 2020.
Motion, move approval, second. Any question?
Kind of unrelated to this, but kind of related. I was thinking, it's after, it's getting to be that time. I was thinking when I saw this in the agenda that we had talked about the possible referendum and the dates. So I'm thinking about the cost of having it separate. Do you have any idea about that?
Yes, I did reach out to the county auditor, and at this point in 2020, the reply I got back is the county said we would have to do a special election on our own without the support of the county, and so I need to follow up on that. I know there's a primary and a presidential election, but my initial response was did not receive a dollar amount as to cost, and that we would actually need to do the election ourselves. So I will follow up further because that hasn't been, it's been 30-some years, I think, since we've had a referendum, so I guess I don't have a precedent to fall back on, but we'll pursue that.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the joint powers agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The last item is board members' request to attend a national conference. Amber is asked to go to a national conference, and she has gone twice during her 4 years.
What?
And in order to go for us, we have to okay it as a board. So can I ask I think it's a good deal to have her go. And can I have permission from the board? Doug?
Second.
And a second. Any questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Aye. No, I'm
To save on cost, she could stay with my parents in Milwaukee and just commute down to the conference on a daily basis.
Okay.
Don't stay on the south side.
Okay, any announcements?
We're on the radio tomorrow.
Oh, good.
I never get to hear. I got to work every day, so.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock. I wonder what it'll be
And
about.
this starts the rotation that will be on twice a month instead of once a month.
Okay. Any other announcements? Board requests for future consideration? Oh, school board norms?
I think we have some improvements to make, but we ended on a good note, so that's what I'll have to say.